Are you ready?
You're listening to DJ Ozzy.
Are you ready?
You're listening.
Religious extremists don't believe in plurality or inclusion, but only in their own superiority and privilege. So in the 1950s, they changed our national motto from the unifying phrase E pluribus unum to an exclusionary proclamation of religious belief, and then forced atheist children to chant that mantra ever since. They don't want a democratic republic of we the people. They want an authoritarian regime of forced conformity, restricting even our most intimate liberties, what we think and even who we are. To achieve that goal, they promote American exceptionalism, which is the lie that the U.S. is blessed and will remain so only as long as we appease the Christian version of God, even when that means attacking unbelievers and queer folk, which our increasingly awful state is already doing. In order to sell the first lie, they need to couch it in another lie, that the U.S. was founded as a Christian nation, which is demonstrably factually false even according to the founders themselves. And the lie that our laws were based on Moses, who experts now say never existed. The First Amendment contradicts the First Commandment because the founders wanted to be the polar opposite of the Sharia-like law of Moses. But if the Ten Commandments were prominently displayed in every classroom, then the kids would believe that lie. That's why religious conservatives want this. They are relentlessly trying to rewrite history to undermine our pioneer example of a secular nation, the only form of governance that can provide religious freedom. Our model has become the envy of the Western world and is now emulated by older countries that were once the oppressive theocracies that our forefathers escaped and that Christian nationalists now want to drag us back to. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick said this bill would promote religious freedom, which of course it won't. It will have the opposite effect, which is the intended effect, to promote Christianity to a privileged position. This bill is an unconstitutional establishment of religion by design. That is the whole point of it, and the only possible purpose behind it, so it must not pass.
All right, members, any questions for this witness? All right, we appreciate you being here. Chair calls Charles Cruz.
Good morning, my beauties and bees, and welcome to another installment of Live from the Hive, coming at you on December 28th, 2024. It is 8:38 a.m. here in Mountain Time, so, 9:38 Central, 10:38 Eastern, and, of course, 7:38 Pacific. So, Pacific time zone people don't usually get up and watch the beginning of the show, which I don't blame them. It's Saturday morning. A lot of people want to sleep in. But thank you all so much for making it in. Thank you so much for being here this morning. I appreciate all of you. And yeah, let me just say good morning to everybody real quick. Got the regular crew. You got Native Atheist, James Nordoff, Stephanie Helms, Deep Arcs, There's Bugbot being a nuisance again. Robert Madewell, Sumami's here. Ember, good morning. Yeah, good morning, everybody. Yeah, and don't get used to this background either, because I'm moving again here in a couple weeks, maybe next week. I don't know when I'm going to be moving. Me and Ben are switching rooms, though. Yep. So I'll be in a different space when on the next episode. I think it should be fairly quick. Good morning, Dave. Good morning, everybody. I hope everybody had a nice holiday. It was pleasant here. I got lots of cute gifts, and including these adorable caterpillar hair clips. And check it out, I got a stretchy Sasquatch. Yeah, that's an important present for me to have, as something to squeeze, something to play with here. A fidget, if you will. So, yes. I am planning on streaming on New Year's Eve, which is going to be next Tuesday. And it will be a late stream, and it'll be live. And we're going to get out the old spirit board, and we're gonna talk to some spirits and have a candlelit little seance. So you might want to check that out if that's something that you're into. We're gonna try to communicate with the dead beyond the veil. We'll see what happens. I got enthusiastic thumbs up from Ben and BB about it, so we're gonna make it happen. Oh, my apartment is almost an orphan asylum. Yeah, but that's orphan cats. That's different. Yeah, I'm in Mountain Time. El Paso's in Mountain Time. Yep. It's the only county in Texas that's in Mountain Time, but we are in Mountain Time. Deep in Mountain Time. Mm-hmm. Yep. So, as far as what the future holds for the Hive, we are rolling into the new year, just trucking along. I got stuff scheduled out into January now, so we should be good there, at least as far as content goes. The political situation, I'm going to play by ear. I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's going to go on, what's going to go down. I have, very few days left to get my shit together, so we'll see how that goes. But until, the hostile takeover of the government. Well, it was supposed to be hostile takeover in 2020. Now they found a way to get in anyway. Regardless, yeah. On today's show, we are doing, we got Insectoid aliens. They're mantis people, and I'm in love. I thought I had done mantis people before, because someone was talking about it the other day, and I looked back through my stream history, right? And there was no history of me doing a mantis people video, so we're going to do that. Insectoid alien video. One of my faves. And then we got to get back to Tartaria. Now, usually I don't do a topic 2 weeks in a row, just to keep things. Yeah, good morning, Sandy. I'm a little drowsy. No coffee this morning. I'm without coffee. I'm actually trying to cut back on the coffee a little bit, but I don't know. Oh, but good morning, Sandy. We have to go back to Tartaria because I've been putting it off talking about these orphan trains and orphan asylums that the Tartarian conspiracy theorists are spouting, and it needs to be addressed because this gets pretty wild. And then, of course, we have Wisdom the Albatross coming up in Bree's Beast series. She did something truly amazing and I am looking forward to talking about it. And just so you know what I'm doing down here, I'm playing with my stretchy Sasquatch. I'm not doing anything weird. Just down here playing with my stretchy Sasquatch. All right. Well, you know what? It's getting down to Cryptic Corner time, and I'm going to see you guys over there. I will, and we'll be, let's do some Insectoid aliens. I'll see you in Cryptic Corner. Hello, my beauties and bees, and welcome to another installment of Cryptic Corner, where we explore the unexplained, the supernatural, the paranormal and hidden, the mysterious, the alien, the accursed, and the forbidden. I'm your host, Miss Bumblebee, and we are about to dive into one of my favorite, at least when it comes to alien topics, one of my favorite topics, which is the Insectoid aliens. Now, for those of you who just come here for cryptic... oh, excuse me. Sorry. For those of you who just come here for Cryptic Corner, this channel started off as a bug channel where I show I have pet insects and spiders and stuff, and I would showcase them and teach about them. It started off like I do presentations and stuff at like schools and parties and things like that. But when I started doing it online, I made a channel. Basically, what triggered me to make my channel was the murder hornet phenomenon, right? And I started making content about myths about insects and bugs, right? Like, just most of it's like BS stuff, like trying to Cryptic Corner. There you go. Most of it was just trying to debunk like just bad folklore and old wives' tales and stuff about bugs. But as I expanded into more and more weird stuff, started getting into cryptozoology, and here we are. Some people might have forgotten that I started off talking about insects in general. One of my earlier produced videos though was called Insectoid Aliens from Planet X, and it was about how we use insects as a design for insect characteristics as a design in science fiction to make things look alien. So this whole point. It's a short little video. If you have, I don't want to watch it again because for me it's pre-transition stuff. And I just generally don't like to watch myself back then. But I don't mind other people seeing what I did back then. I'm not ashamed of who I was or what I was doing or anything like that. Just for me, it's a dysphoria thing to see myself in that stage. But regardless, you can go check that out. And I do talk about Starship Troopers. I talk about Star Wars. Talk about Men in Black. Talk about just aliens in general in fiction. Have almost exclusively been given insectoid features to make them look otherworldly and strange, because it doesn't get much more divided from our ancestors than insects, right? Or protostomia and deuterostomia, where that's how far back our separation goes. Back to when we were single cell organisms. Their ancestors had one hole, our ancestors had two. Or no, that's the other way around. Their ancestors had two holes, our ancestor had one. Because we were just a floating butthole, that's right. but they were a floating mouth and butthole. They were basically a tube when they start development. So that's how far back our distinction from arthropods and from all of protostomia goes. So they are alien to us. They are different than us. Yeah, those flea stacks had insectoid-like features, like the big unblinking eyes. Exactly. Now the flea stacks also had reptilian features, and reptilian features are probably the second most common in aliens. But today we're focusing on the insectoid features. I think we've done reptilian stuff before, haven't we? Let me go check. Let's see. Search across channel rep. Just the Praveen Mohan one. We haven't ever done like a deep dive, which is the Hindi reptilian folklore. We're not having Praveen teach us today, though. We're gonna do somebody different. I don't know if I've ever shown this guy or not. His name is Preston. What you doing? There it is. Okay. I have to click on it twice for some reason when I open up a new one. Preston Dennett. Now he does a lot of ufology and UFO and alien stuff. If we go look at his videos, he's 13 hours ago. He's talking about it looks like a Nordic person, but UFO entities, little people from the stars. Yeah, this is a UFO and alien channel, right? But a few years back, he did a video exclusively on the praying mantis extraterrestrials, and now that's what I want to talk about today. Let's get our mantis people on, because why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we want to dive into mantis people? Am I right? Slee stacks bring back memories. I believe I have Slee stacks stomp set up to play at the end of CrypticCorner today, so you're in luck. Stick around, because that's the little Slee stack song I play sometimes on the channel. So Sandy's sitting out on the porch listening. Good. It's time to snuggle with Butters and listen. Absolutely. I passed 420 subs this morning. Had to rip and sep. We'll rip to that. Congratulations, Captive Desk. I'd like to think that, I helped inspire you to pursue this. Maybe not on Captive Desk, but maybe on Grassman Chronicles. I don't know. Maybe as an inspiration. That'd be cool. Let's let Mr. Dennett fill us in on encounters with praying mantis extraterrestrials. There's 3 encounters here. It's long, so I'm going to have to speed it up because it's almost an hour.
Hello everyone, my name is Preston Dennett, and welcome to another episode of UFOs and the Paranormal. Today's episode is called 3 Encounters with Praying Mantis Extraterrestrials. Praying mantis is probably one of the most common types of ETs that people report to me. I've covered a couple of other cases in some of my previous videos, but the 3 cases that I'd like to cover today are all brand new. And the first case I call Case 1, They Come From Afar. The main witness is a Southern California woman by the name of Jeannie. She did allow me to use her real name, but I'm only going to use her first name here. And she had an amazing series of incidents, actually, which led her to the realization that she was in touch with praying mantis extraterrestrials. And the first incident occurred in 1998. She and her husband, now her ex-husband, had gone out to dinner, and they returned home, watched some TV, and then went to bed. And at around 2 a.m., Jeannie woke up for a very strange reason. As she says, I was awakened because I had this horrific taste of garlic in my mouth. It was as if I had eaten a complete head of garlic, the whole thing, raw. That's how strong it was. Well,
how does Jeannie know what that's like? I've not eaten a whole clove of garlic. I've never done that. Sounds absolutely awful, no doubt. And I've definitely never woken up. Maybe someone thought she was a vampire and shoved a clove of garlic in her mouth while she was sleeping. I don't know.
You can imagine it woke me up. So I thought, what in the heck is this? Jeannie had no explanation. She hadn't even eaten garlic that evening. She woke up, looked at her husband. He was sound asleep. She went to the bathroom, checked her mouth in the mirror. There was nothing strange. She gargled, she brushed her teeth, but nothing could get rid of this garlicky smell. And she ended up just going back to bed and falling asleep. But this is how it all started. This is when she really started to question what was going on in her life. This was not the first time that strange incidents had occurred to her. And now, looking back on her life, she could count dozens of other weird incidents that...
You can wake up with strange taste in your mouth. That's not... it doesn't mean praying mantis aliens.
She would call unexplained. And many of these involved weird nighttime incidents during which strange figures would visit her and give messages to her while she was sort of in a half-sleep, half-waking state. And whenever this occurred, she would write them down in a little diary that she kept, but she didn't know quite what to make of them. She did not associate this with ETs. Despite this, she was developing a strong interest in UFOs. She had had a lot of dreams about UFOs, started reading books about UFOs.
Tell you what, when I wake up and taste garlic, my first thought isn't aliens, but that's just me personally. You know, I'm not telling Jeannie how to live her life. Morning, Junie.
And pretty soon had a pretty good library of UFO books. But she never connected the dots until the year 2000. At that time, she was reading the newspaper and saw that there was a little UFO group near where she lived, and they were hosting a speaker, a UFO investigator by the name of Daryl Sims. Daryl Sims is, of course, a pretty prominent UFO investigator, and Jeannie decided that she would attend the meeting just because she was interested in the subject of UFOs. She did not think she was involved. She enjoyed the meeting very much. Daryl Sims had a very interesting presentation, and afterwards she approached...
Apparently Daryl Sims was convincing enough to tell her that waking up tasting garlic means that mantis aliens are attacking you in your sleep.
Him and told him about her experience with waking up and tasting this strong taste of garlic in her mouth. Daryl seemed to be very interested in this. He told her he thought that it was a screen memory, and he offered to hypnotize her. Jeannie was a little nervous about it at first, but she agreed, and Daryl came to her apartment.
Hypnosis, which is, you know, famously accurate, and pulls famously accurate memories and couldn't possibly have problematic implications and strong contributions to the satanic panic.
Apartment and conducted a hypnosis session. And at first, Jeannie didn't recall
That was a powerful mustache, Robert. You're not wrong.
anything. She went into a hypnotic trance pretty easily, but seemed to be blocked. And it wasn't...
Derek does look like he wants to sell me a pillow. You are not wrong. So, tasting garlic equals... Yes. Because while garlic drives away vampires, garlic... Apparently, aliens use it to put in your... Like, aliens sneak into your bedroom at night and spray, like, garlic banaka in your mouth or something.
Until the very end of the session that something did happen. She did recall something very profound that was related to that evening when she woke up tasting garlic in her mouth. As she says, and I quote, "Towards the end of that session, I could see myself standing between the bathroom and my bed. And I saw what looked like an ant creature, like a praying mantis. I'm not sure. I saw mostly its head and its face, but I saw this creature shoving something down my throat. I don't know if it was a tube or what it was. I know I was
Obviously, it was garlic.
fighting it. It was big, a lot bigger than me. It scared the daylights out of me when I saw it there. In that flash, I was terrified. I was trying to fight off this thing because it was shoving something down my throat. Like I said, I couldn't tell if it was a tube or if it was trying to inject something down my...
Never non-consensually shove something down someone else's throat. Never. Yes. Mike Lindell versus the Mantis aliens.
throat or what it was. But I could see and feel that thing going down my throat, and this creature was holding me down, so it could do this. I just felt a force holding me down so that I couldn't fight it.
I like how he has a little badge. Look at his little badge. He's important. And he's got like a little smile on his face. He's like, just doing my job. And she's like, and he's like, hold still, little human. I'm almost done. And he like pumps garlic into...
Although I was trying. It was a brief flashback, but it really quite traumatized her. And Daryl Sims was very much convinced that this was a memory of an actual encounter. Jeannie was...
Now, I gotta ask, when Daryl Sims was hypnotizing her, did he say things like, are there any creatures in the room with you? Are there any strange beings in the room with you? What are the strange beings doing? Because that's the kind... Because you can sculpt someone's responses with the way you ask them questions under hypnosis. Not that I think that... I mean, my thoughts on hypnosis is mostly psychosomatic anyway. Like, those aren't real. You're not really recovering lost memories. Because, I mean, people... That was what... Yeah, what was the book? Amanda Remembers or something like that? About, like, satanic blood rituals and stuff that this woman, like, fabricated in her mind and thought that they were actual childhood memories of her parents abusing her.
Of course, shocked. She wondered how could something like this have happened to her and how long had this been going on. And her first step was, of course, to examine her entire life and look for any weird happenings that might be...
If she was describing that she experienced that live, Dave, I would say yes, sleep paralysis matches. But I don't think so under hypnosis. I think hypnosis, this can be fully fabricated by the guy swinging the pendulum, so to speak. So Mike Lindell here, Cowboy Lindell, the Dark Rider with his black hat and probably duster. I don't know. Looks like it could be a duster or maybe it's just a blazer.
Related to this event. And she didn't have to look very deeply. There were lots of clues that something had been going on in her life for a very long time. One early incident that immediately stood out occurred when she was about 8 years old. Her parents had sent her to a 6-week-long camp for girls in the Hollywood Hills in California, her and her sister. And there was all kinds of fun activities for the preteens, but Jeannie didn't really want to go there. She wanted to stay at home with her friends. And one of the reasons was because she did not like sleeping outside. She had a very deep-seated fear of sleeping outside, and also a fear of coyotes, although she had no idea where this fear came from. Thankfully, there were little bungalows for the girls to sleep in. However, many times people would want to sleep outside next to the campfire. And this, of course, made Jeannie very concerned, and she always chose to sleep inside. But then one evening came where everybody, all the girls, decided that they were going to sleep out under the stars, and one by one, all the girls left the bungalow except Jeannie and her little sister, who refused. They wanted to sleep inside. And that's what they did. Jeannie was in the top bunk next to the window, and her sister was in a lower bunk. And sometime in the middle of the night, Jeannie was woken up by a weird disturbance. It began without any warning. Suddenly, there was a bright flash of light filling the room, accompanied by a strong rush of wind. And it was quite traumatic. Jeannie thought at first that she had actually been struck by lightning. And
Native Atheist says, sleep paralysis is scary. I haven't experienced it much. I experienced it quite a bit. I talk about it a bit on the show, though, so I'm not going to recap it again today. I will just, I may if one of the stories gets more relevant, if someone actually is experiencing sleep paralysis. So far, what she's described isn't sleep paralysis. Things recovered under hypnosis are suspicious at best. Complete BS at worst, but it comes down to the fact that your brain you don't actually remember events and things as they happen. You rebuild them in your mind every time you think about them. And it's easy when someone puts you in a hypnopompic state like that to fabricate events within memories, or even to fabricate dream states.
She didn't bother to stop and investigate. She leapt out of bed and, along with her little sister, ran outside screaming and ran to the camp. All the other girls were already asleep. It was just a few hundred feet away. At this point, Jeannie's memory becomes a little bit confused. She remembers finding a spot and climbing into a sleeping bag. And then she remembers something that really scared her. She remembers waking up and seeing several very large coyotes surrounding her and glaring at her with these very cold, staring eyes. And her memory ends at this point. She didn't know how to explain this incident. She just knew that she was afraid of sleeping outside.
That's is this a real memory? I don't know. That could be. Maybe that's why she's afraid of coyotes too. But what does that have to do with our insectoid aliens? I'm just wondering. I was hoping there'd be aliens here. And I'm cool with coyotes. I like coyotes.
And now that she knew about this other encounter with the praying mantis, she wondered if this might be connected. And she contacted Daryl Sims, who agreed to do another hypnosis session. And he arrived at her apartment. She sat
She's like, "Sir, can I pay you another few $100?" This is before he started his pillow grift, though.
down in her easy chair while Daryl Sims placed her under hypnosis.
Daryl.
And she was surprised how well
I was calling him Derek earlier. I think somebody called him Derek in the side chat, and I was just like, went with it. His name's Daryl. Daryl Sims.
it worked. She could vividly remember going back to this incident, reliving the whole scene as if she was really there. And as she got closer and closer to this moment of this, quote, lightning strike, she began to get very, very anxious. She started to shout out, "I need to get out of here. I need to get out of here." Daryl had done hypnosis before. He knew how to calm her down, which he did.
Daryl had done hypnosis before. Like, you didn't just tell us that he did hypnosis on this same person previously a few minutes ago.
And he continued the hypnosis session,
Hey,
bringing her
Trees.
closer and closer to this moment. And suddenly she was there, and she saw the cause of her fear. It wasn't lightning at all. And as she was laying there in her bunk bed, she woke up to see the room filling with a bright, blazing light. And seconds later, 2 extraterrestrials began to come in through the closed window. As Jeannie says, "I saw 4 arms coming through the window. They were long, skinny arms with something like 3 or 4 fingers at the end of them and a real bright light behind them. I ran out of the room." Jeannie continued the hypnosis session, and she was very resistant at first, but Daryl Sims was very persistent and led her to the next incident that she remembered, where she was being surrounded by coyotes. And as she came upon that memory, that's exactly what she saw. The only difference was
The important thing to remember is that mantis aliens use coyotes as their messengers, or as their... they use coyotes to wake you up.
the coyotes' appearance. They were much larger than she remembered, and all of them were staring at her with eyes that glowed a bright, brilliant, glaring blue color. And that's all she could remember. And Daryl told her that the coyotes were probably another screen memory, but it was clear to her that he was probably right. These were definitely not
Screen memories, which means memories that he created for her to experience.
normal coyotes. But she ended the hypnosis sessions at this point because it was just too frightening for her. And taken alone, I think this would just be one piece of the puzzle that she couldn't make sense of, but there were quite a few other strange incidents that she recalled. One thing that she recalled was having lots and lots of UFO dreams, pretty much her whole life. As Jeannie says, all through my childhood.
Depends on which coyotes you're talking about. Eastern coyotes get pretty big. Eastern coyotes are almost red wolf size and get up to like, what is it, like 30 kilograms or something like that.
And into my adulthood, I would have the same dream over and over again. And as I grew older, I was always age appropriate in the dream. And the dream was, I was in a park. It was nighttime, and there were lots of people around. All of a sudden, the night sky filled with all kinds of saucers or flying machines. They were filling the sky, and everybody was panicked and running. So because they were running, I was running. And all of these people were scared to death, but I was never afraid. I've had this same dream over and over. And this was not Jeannie's only E.T. themed.
Sounds like Jeannie watched Close Encounters of the Third Kind when she was a child and has memories of that, maybe.
Dream. She had many other dreams about UFOs. As she says, I had a dream where I was fixing a meal, and I was excited because I knew that, quote, the visitors were coming, and I was getting ready to welcome them. Then shortly after that, I had another dream that there was a mothership hovering over my apartment. More recently, I've had dreams where I was sitting in a park at nighttime. I was sitting in the grass with a person, and then all of a sudden, out of the sky, these UFOs were coming straight at me in a V formation. They were all identical, and I said to the person sitting next to me, "See, I told you they were real, I told you." Another repetitive dream she wrote down in her diary, she called it the Star People. As she says, in this dream, I was in a city like New York, walking on the sidewalk in a crowd of people, and out of the crowd, a young man holding a big stack of newspapers came up to me. He found me out of the crowd, handed me one of the papers, and then disappeared. And I looked
But she's advising that these are dreams, that she's aware that these are dreams.
down at the headline of the paper, in big, huge black letters, it said Star People. And that was the dream. Jeannie, in the past, had always looked at these dreams as just a reflection of her interest in UFOs, and now she began to wonder if it might be the reverse, that maybe these dreams were reflections of actual contact. And the more she thought about it, the more this seemed like the case.
Jeannie, come on now. You're Mary Sueing yourself into the story a bit here. It sounds like you're really into UFOs, which is cool. I'm really into UFOs too. But you gotta keep reality on track. Are you taking your meds? Are you getting plenty of sleep? Just things to ask yourself if you start having experiences like this.
Because she was having other very strange experiences with these nighttime entities coming into her bedroom. One time, Jeannie was laying in
Is she seeing any other doctors besides Dr. Sims, the Mike Pillow guy?
bed, kind of dozing, when she had a distinct impression that a gray alien or something was standing in the doorway. As she says, I felt that there was a gray peeking into our bedroom, and as soon as I opened my eyes, it was gone. Then a while later, I felt that there were two of them standing at the foot of my bed. With these two at the foot of my bed, it was like we were talking telepathically, and they knew that I wanted to know what was going on, what the truth of all of this was. And I could hear them talking with each other, wondering what they were going to do with me because I wanted to know so badly. Those were the words I heard. Then I opened my eyes, and they weren't there. This was all before she had gone to meet Daryl Sims, but now, having gone under hypnosis and recalled these incidents, she started to really connect the dots and realized that she was probably having contact with extraterrestrials on some level.
So now there's gray aliens, giant coyotes, and mantis aliens?
One incident really convinced her that it was related to all of this. For a period of about a month, Jeannie found that she was unable to sleep peacefully at night. Normally she had no trouble sleeping, but for a month she would just toss and turn and felt like she was constantly on guard and then something was trying to get her. As she says, I'd fall asleep and find myself kicking and fighting, and I never do this. This is very unusual behavior for me. This lasted about a month, and then one night, I was kicking so hard all the covers were at the end of my bed. This actually happened. Towards the end of the night,
It happens to me a lot. I kick the covers off the bed, and all my plushies and all my pillows. I'll wake up and I'll just have like the sheet and like one pillow without its pillowcase on it. Sometimes I don't know what I'm doing, but apparently I'm fighting for my life while I sleep.
In a flash, while I was kicking and fighting, I saw myself in an examination room, and I saw one of these creatures standing at the foot of this table, and it was huge. It looked like a mantis, or some kind of animal-looking thing. It must have been 7 feet tall, and it was leaning over me, and there was another in the background. It was either shorter than this one or possibly as tall, but because it was standing further back, I couldn't tell the size of it. And that was just in a flash, in an instant. I saw that scene and I thought, well, this must be what I have been fighting. Following that evening, she began to sleep peacefully again. She reverted back.
He doesn't look. They keep talking about, oh yeah, these terrible mantis people doing this to me and that to me, and then they show him and they look like the most chill dude in the world. It's like, hi, how are ya? Did you sleep okay? All right, open up. I need to just stick this down you.
To her normal sleeping habits, but again, she connected all of this together and realized that she was in contact with ETs. And it was shortly later that she underwent hypnotic regression with Daryl Sims and confirmed this. Following this, she became very active in the UFO field. She actually led a UFO group for a short time, which she gave up eventually because it was just too much work. But she continued to have...
That checks out. Her experience is often the type of story that someone who wants to run one of these organizations will say they have. Deborah Hatswell, with her experiences with, I don't know what you'd call them, wolfmen of the UK. Yeah, just people that start these organizations and these investigation groups and stuff like that. They tend to be the ones with the wildest, most out there stories.
Experiences. Often these, what she perceives to be grays, would come into her room when she was in a quasi-sleeping, quasi-awake state, and they would give her messages. And she'd always write them down. One one message that she wrote down was very short.
African gray parrots, yes, that's what she must have met. African gray. Morning, apostate sister. I can never remember which one of you is always on this. I think it's Nancy, though. But regardless, good morning. All my lurkers out there, I don't mind if you lurk. I'm just doing this as a morning show. Some people aren't ready to people yet, so just like sit back, relax. I think Sandy's out on her porch, on her porch having a cup of coffee. Sumami's cuddled up with Butters listening. I just chillax and we'll get through these mantis encounters.
It said, and I quote, "We are trying to communicate with you, but you don't understand." Other messages were more profound. One time she woke up and wrote down the very provocative message, "Those that come from afar will show you the way." Interestingly, while Jeannie does have a lot of the markers pointing towards being a UFO abductee, she has never seen a UFO, nor does she have any unexplained scars or scoop marks on her body, which are typical of many UFO contactees. But she did notice a few other symptoms. On several occasions, she woke up.
Mantises are just better surgeons than greys. Now, sometimes a gray can get a good mantis on the ship with them when they go abducting, and they can abduct people, and like the mantises are so good they leave no scars. But when the greys have to do it themselves, sometimes they leave scars. They leave behind little traces and stuff like that. But mantises are experts. We're just gonna go with that. We're building folklore.
Up to find that her navel, her belly button, was red, sore, and inflamed. That always puzzled her, but she now links it to her UFO experiences. Probably the most inexplicable physical symptom that she had was fluorescence on her body. After reading about this weird effect, that some contactees report that their bodies will fluoresce under a black light, she decided she would check herself with a black light and see if there was any evidence there, and to her surprise, there was. And she found that under a black light, the palms of her hands glowed with a bright fluorescence. Her friend was there. Her friend didn't have any of this. Jeannie went and washed her hands vigorously, but still they glowed under a black light.
I have not been abducted. I do not glow under a black light. I actually have I keep a black light in here because I have a lot of my tapestries and stuff are black light sensitive. But as you can see, my hands. Actually, are they glowing? They're glowing a little bit. Look at that. I must have been abducted by an alien. I think I was abducted, guys. Oh, okay. Hey, Patty. Sorry, I had it backwards. It's like, does Nancy show up under her name? Yes, Patty, yeah. So, I may be abducted by aliens. My mantis is really glowing under. Y'all can't really see the black light very well, but it's just a little wind. And, oh yeah, I almost forgot. I have this too. For scorpion season. Oh, I'd have to put batteries in it first. But I got a flashlight, a black light, should take I'm not gonna mess with it right now. Anyway, yeah, let's get back to the show.
And glowed for the next several days before finally fading away. So while some of Jeannie's encounters have been somewhat traumatic, she has dealt with them as best as she can. One thing that she says unnerves her is seeing other people's drawings of praying mantis ETs. They look very familiar to her, and as she says, when people start showing me pictures of different ETs, there are some that I can't look at. I get goosebumps all over, and it makes me want to throw up. Some of them make me cringe. I can't look at them.
But seriously, they are the best surgeons, right? Like, look at those nimble surgeon fingers. Look at that. Look how skilled their little hands are. This is why when a mantis alien is involved in your abduction, you're guaranteed no scars. I don't know if they put it in the fine print, like that when you sign off to have your to allow them to examine you. I'm not going to really sign off. They imagine that if there were actually aliens abducting people, it would be more like the way we go out and catch a like a big cat or something or a shark and put a tag on it to track what it does. I think it'd be more like that.
And it makes me want to throw up. Some of them make me cringe. I can't look at them. The next case I'd like to talk about, I call Case 2, the Giant Grasshopper Dream. This is a very interesting case. It occurred to a man I call Tom. That's a pseudonym. And this case shows how people can have ET contact and not be aware of it for a very long time. For Tom, it all began with a dream. The first time he had this dream,
Oh,
Tom had no reason to think
Tom.
much of it other than it was an extremely vivid and terrifying dream.
Tom.
In this dream, he says, I am being chased around my grandparents' farmhouse by a giant grasshopper. He wasn't hurt in the dream, but every time he dreams this, the fear of the dream wakes him up. At the time, he was just a kid, around 10 or 11. But along with this dream came a dread phobia of grasshoppers. And the dream would repeat over and over again, all through childhood up into adulthood. Interestingly, it was about the time that he started having this repetitive dream that there was another strange incident. Tom and his family had gone to visit his grandparents' farm. Tom doesn't remember anything unusual happening at the farm itself. However, when they arrived home after the visit,
In a week or two, they'll make you a star. Week turns into years, how quickly they pass, and all the stars they never were are parking cars and pumping gas. Thanks for the earworm, John Lovell. Oh, is that Probe? Holididdy?
everybody was puzzled about one strange mystery. It was 1 hour later than it should have been. They had missing time driving home. None of them have ever heard of such a thing. They didn't know what to make of it, and unable to explain it, nobody made much of it, and didn't know what to think of it. Meanwhile, Tom...
Because kids have weird dreams. Kids have the weirdest dreams. I remember having weird dreams when I was a kid too, because you aren't sure about how the world actually works in some of the corners, and I'd have dreams about poltergeists in my house, like stuff flying around all the time. And it doesn't mean that was real, that I had those experiences and then they were erased. I guess mantis ones are more likely than human
Tom
ones.
continued to have his very terrifying grasshopper nightmare. It was always the same, and it continued right up through adulthood, and his dread fear...
That's not a grasshopper. That's a longhorned beetle up close. Pretty savage looking, huh? But they're real sweethearts. They're not like mean or anything.
...of grasshoppers also persisted. Time marched on. He ended up going to college. He earned a master's degree in education and another in psychology. He moved to Florida, where he became a college professor. And it was around this time that he began to connect the dots. He became interested in UFOs, and he noticed a couple of strange things that seemed to be related to the UFO phenomenon. As Tom says, and I quote, "I have scoop marks. I have chronic sinusitis. I have 3 dots in a...
Those are called scoop marks. I have those on my body, too. I just call them scars. They're just scars from things that have happened to me throughout my life. I didn't know they were alien scoop marks. I mean, some of those are literally scars that you get from seeing them by a campfire, right? Like an ember pops out and burns your skin in a spot, and it just heals. You may not even notice it, and you'll end up with a scar. You may not even notice that it's a burn that it's actual burned skin until it blisters. So you might not even ever notice it until you see the scar. It's these little tiny scars.
...triangle pattern on my throat. A doctor looking at an MRI of my sinuses said it appeared that I had broken my nose, though I am unaware of any such injury. In 1983, he had 2 UFO sightings, and this is when he really began to research UFOs. He joined APRO, the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, and MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network. His interest in UFOs continued to grow to the point where he actually wrote a small UFO newsletter.
And we could do a show on each one of those organizations. It'd be a deep dive into how they were founded and sort of parsing the what seems to be woo and stuff like that from people having genuine experiences. I'm not trying to disparage anybody having general experiences, but I am saying that yes, there are grifters out there who who have these extraordinary experiences that are way out there, and say that they commune with aliens and things like that, and it's just it gets really convoluted, and you can't help but think this person is doing the same grift as someone who says they have a direct connection with a god.
And meanwhile, his terrifying dream about being chased by a grasshopper continued. By this point, he was pretty sure what this repetitive dream meant. Not only the dream, but all the other signs. He figured it out. He connected the dots and realized there was a pretty good possibility that he was an experiencer, a UFO abductee. And he considered regressive hypnosis, but wasn't quite ready to pursue it.
because you had a dream when you were a kid about a giant grasshopper, it means you were an abductee. That's such a weird leap. I had, like I said, dreams about poltergeist and stuff like that when I was a kid. I'd have dreams about. I had a dream once that I was swimming in a river and someone grabbed something underwater, grabbed my ankles, and I looked down and it was Jesus. So was Jesus really trying to drown me in a river in Missouri? I don't think so. I don't think that's proof that I really had that experience. I think it's weird that Tom thinks that his grasshopper dream means that it was real.
But he still felt a little bit ambivalent about all of this and wasn't entirely sure that he was, just jumping to conclusions. All he had were small clues pointing towards the possibility that he was an experiencer. He didn't have any real proof. But then came another strange incident. One day Tom was talking with his younger brother, who related a strange memory involving Tom that took place at their grandparents' farm. As Tom says, my brother recalled seeing me outside at my grandparents' farm covered in grasshoppers. His brother recalled seeing him covered from head to toe in grasshoppers all over his body. That really raised alarm bells in Tom's mind, and he felt like it's probably related to his...
That sounds like it might be the reason for his grasshopper dream. Like, remembering getting covered with grasshoppers and being traumatized by it.
Own dream of being chased around by a giant grasshopper. And some years later, Tom asked his brother again about the dream.
That's a mantis. Y'all keep, just jumping around insects like it's no thing. There's so much diversity among insects.
And his brother had no memory of it. He denied ever saying this to Tom. This is another clue. As you may know, there are often memory problems associated with UFO encounters. And now here was Tom's brother denying that he had ever had this dream. But Tom's sure because it left a very deep and vivid impression on him. So it was this clue that pretty much convinced Tom that he was in fact had an encounter with a giant grasshopper-like extraterrestrial. And he's still considering hypnosis. He hasn't done it yet, but he knows enough about UFOs to put all the pieces together. The dreams, the marks on his body, the missing time, his sinus problems, his brother's dream, all of this comes together, and he's pretty sure that he's probably a contactee. And for now, that's enough for him.
That's just wish fulfillment, I think. Fried grasshoppers is a thing. Yeah, when they did when we were having locust plagues in North America, one of the suggestions was that people eat the locust. But you're talking trillions of these animals.
As of yet, he does not recall anything else. So the third encounter I'd like to talk about is, I think, the most interesting one. I call this Case 3, It Walked Upright. This involves a lady by the name of Eleanor. That's not her real name. And this is a very interesting account.
Okay.
At 4:30 a.m. in mid-November of 2006, Eleanor began to get ready for her morning jog. She lived in a very rural area of O'Fallon, Illinois. This is a small neighborhood subdivision.
I have a cousin that lives in O'Fallon. As you see, it's like down here by St. Louis. So I have a lot of family down in the St. Louis area. Spent a lot of my time down there. That's like if going to the city was going to St. Louis growing up. So I know O'Fallon.
Intermingled with cornfields and swaths of forest. It's a very pretty location with lots of greenery. Less than 10 miles to the southeast is Scott Air Force Base. This might be significant. Eleanor herself is a school teacher and a daycare worker. At the time of this incident, she was in her mid-30s. She has 5 children. And to keep fit, she would regularly take early morning jogs along with her dog through her neighborhood. On this particular morning, events began as normal. She got up around 4:30 a.m. and with her dog started jogging down the street. She turned off her street onto another street, and then she turned onto a little road called Illini Drive and began to head north. She was just passing Fulton Junior High School on her left. On her right was a cornfield, and Illini Drive ended in...
Now that you mention it, I got some crickets for Christmas. See? From Dr. Ben. They're really good. They do have a great source of protein. 4.3 calories. 0.15 grams of total fat. And that's 0.05 grams of saturated fat and 0.014 trans fat. 4 grams of sodium. And most of the stuff is coming from the seasoning. Most of the like fats and salt and stuff is coming from the sour cream and onion. But as far as protein goes, this is 0.67 grams of protein, so that's not too bad. Crickets are scrumptious.
In the T section just ahead of her onto Kyle Road. She was about 200 feet approximately from the T intersection, which was illuminated by a streetlight, and this is when something very strange happened, and I'll just let Eleanor describe it in her own words. As Eleanor says, "Suddenly, my dog became alert. She slowed her pace."
How are you letting Eleanor describe it in her own words when you're reading it? You're describing it in Eleanor's own words.
Lifted her head and ears, and locked her sight onto something ahead. I casually looked up, expecting to see an animal. It was normal to come across deer, coyote, foxes, or occasionally other pedestrians. In the road ahead was something I couldn't make sense of. I slowly came to a stop as I tried to figure out what I was looking at. It was walking adjacent to the streetlight. It was almost as tall as the streetlight and moving to the right. It was very dark gray and walked upright. My first thought was that someone was in costume doing some kind of acrobatics on stilts with extenders on their arms. As I watched, I could tell that it moved with ease and intention, and that no one could make stilts bend at the knees and elbows. It was long, thin, and had what looked like points for hands.
Hell yeah, this thing sounds cool. I want to see it.
I was thinking grasshopper at first, because of the jointed legs and the tips of the appendages, and it appeared to have a kind of an exoskeleton. The creature was very dark gray, not quite black, and it seemed to be all one color. I decided later that it was more praying mantis-like. Its incredibly long legs were taking massive strides as its arms were held up forward and bent at the elbows, with the forearms and hands moving up and down in a pumping motion. The profile of the head seemed almost rectangular, but wider at the top and narrowing where it...
So, like real praying mantises, they do use their front limbs, these limbs, they do actually use those for locomotion too. They have like legs that come off of them, like regular legs, if you look.
Connected to the body, and as its gaze swept from side to side, almost like it was looking for something on the ground. Each stride was
It was looking for you, Eleanor.
approximately 6 or 7 feet. It covered a lot of ground in only a few steps. It seemed unhurried and focused. It did not seem to be worried about being spotted. I did not see any clothing. It looked exactly like an upright, walking, praying mantis, with more insect quality to it than human. So I stopped where I was and watched what I was seeing. It was just walking down the road, and I realized it was a real and solid creature, living. As it walked, its legs lifted up and would reach and stretch in very long strides. It was long, dark, and skinny, and as it was striding, its arms were moving in a pumping motion above its head. Eleanor had never seen anything like this. She'd never seen a UFO before. Aliens were the farthest thing from her mind, and now seeing this figure, she really struggled to orient herself. As she says, "My mind was whirling with trying to decide what to do. I really thought about turning back and racing for home, but for some reason I was more compelled to get a closer look. It had not
I'd have followed it too. It sounds like maybe she saw a bucket truck at night. That's my...
seemed to be aware of me and was continuing its movement down the road, heading closer to the wooded and darkened section. I slowly started running forward, and I never took my eyes off the creature. My dog was very alert and also watching, but she did not pull on the leash or bark. By the time I got to the corner, it moved far enough into the darkness and I could no longer see it. I knew better than to follow it into the darkness, and I turned left onto my normal route. I kept my eyes wide open for the rest of my run and every run after that. I've never seen it again."
So, and she says it's as tall as a light pole. Those things are, what, like, depending on your location, your neighborhood and stuff, like 18 to like 30 feet tall, something like that. So a 30-foot tall praying mantis just walking down the street in this kind of residential neighborhood next to a high school or a junior high school.
This encounter, of course, unnerved her and left her with all kinds of questions. It actually completely changed her worldview. She had no idea that things like this existed. As she says, "I went back to that area later in the day during daylight, and I stood under the streetlight. I am 5 foot 5 inches, and the streetlight was at least 3 times my height. So I know that the being was close to 15 feet tall. I have never given much thought to aliens until this time, and it has still taken me years to conclude that it was likely some kind of interdimensional being. I compulsively wonder why I saw this. Why would it let me see it? Was it a mistake? What am I supposed to..."
What was you smoking before you took your walk? I know, when I had like kids at home, I would go for a walk in the evening to have a quick smoke, smoke some herb, but maybe somebody laced your herb with something else that made you see someone dipped it in acid or some shit like that. People used to do stuff like that to just total strangers, like lace their weed with stuff. It was messed up. That's why it's so great that we have dispensaries now. It's so much safer.
Supposed to do about it. Sometimes I wish I never saw it, but at the same time, I now have an awareness that there is something more. She did tell her family, her husband and her children, who were very supportive. They didn't know what to make of it. Neither did she.
Did it have a head? I didn't hear a description of a head. Mostly just about legs and arms.
She began doing research and did run across a similar account of a gentleman who also saw a praying mantis about 40 miles away crossing the road late at night. In his case, he saw a praying mantis that was on all fours crossing the road, so he doesn't know how tall it was. Another interesting factor to this particular account is that it occurred in the year 2006, only a short time after the very famous Chicago O'Hare Airport sighting. So this really made her wonder. Chicago O'Hare Airport was only about 300 miles away from her location, which
only about 300 miles, only like all the way across the state. You're going from O'Fallon, Illinois, which is down by St. Louis, all the way up to O'Hare, which is the Chicago airport. The St. Louis airport's a lot closer.
as the UFO flies is not very far away. She wondered if possibly there was a connection there. Another thing that concerned her was that this incident occurred so close to Scott Air Force Base. I was also intrigued by this fact, and I immediately thought of the sighting that occurred 6 years earlier when a group of police officers across the state of Illinois in this exact area tracked a triangular-shaped UFO, which actually went right along the outskirts of Scott Air Force Base, directly between Scott Air Force Base and O'Fallon.
I'm pretty sure that one turned out to be a blimp that they were transporting, though, didn't it?
Illinois, where Eleanor lived at this time. So there does seem to be other activity in this area.
I think I talked about that UFO incident in my Black Triangle video, and I believe it turned out that one was a blimp. Black triangles, just in general, though, black triangles were like seen a lot in the 60s and 70s, and it was testing stealth bombers. But people they didn't release to the public that, hey, these are stealth bombers. So all people saw were black triangles flying through the sky.
But Eleanor does not know if there is a connection to Scott Air Force Base. But as I spoke with her, I thought perhaps this was a one-off, a singular event. But that's not usually the case when someone sees ETs close up. This is often an indicator that they've probably had other encounters, often which start in very early childhood. And I asked Eleanor, had she had any strange experiences in her childhood? And she said that yes, in fact, she had. She remembered seeing strange hooded figures come into her room when she was just a little girl. This would always occur late at night or early morning. She would scream, call for her parents, who would come running in, and of course nothing would be there. It happened often enough that her parents forbade her from waking them up any further. So she was kind of on her own with this. And she did have one really vivid memory, which she recalled as a nightmare.
So that's sounds like definitely sounds like the sleep paralysis kind of situation.
Which she wasn't in her room at all. She was in what appeared to be a UFO, presumably. As Eleanor says, and I quote, "In this nightmare, I awoke on a metal bed with a sheet pulled over my face. I could hear what I thought were doctors discussing a very serious medical procedure. I could see shadowy figures moving around through the sheet, but I could not move. I felt nervous, but was wondering who was getting an operation and what might be going on. As I lay there, someone began to lift the sheet off of me. There were doctors standing around my body with trays of metallic surgical tools. The doctors seemed to be wearing something like surgical gowns. I could not see their faces. I was fully engulfed in the deepest terror, knowing that they were going to fix me. I don't know what happened next. I woke up, and it was morning."
So if she didn't see their faces, why did you illustrate them with gray alien faces or mantis faces or
following
whatever?
this, Eleanor did start having some anxieties and night terrors, which slowly faded away and ended. But this was not her last unusual experience. There was one incident that occurred in 1986 when she was a senior in high school. At the time, she lived in Elk Grove, California. And one morning, she was going to school to attend a field trip. A friend was driving. Eleanor was in the front passenger seat, and a young preschool-aged child sat in the back seat. And Eleanor was looking out of the passenger window when she heard the child sitting behind her gasp loudly. At that exact moment, a car was pulling up next to them, and Eleanor looked at the driver, and she also gasped because the driver did not appear to be human. As Eleanor says, I was pretty shocked to see the profile of an elongated, oval-shaped head. It was smooth, with minimal profile features. The color was extremely pale and had a corpse-like look to it. There were just a few spriggles of hair coming from its head. As suddenly as I could take this in, the head slowly turned.
Corpse-like, but he drew, again, big alien eyes, or used a picture of big alien eyes. I don't know, are these drawings the people made?
And made eye contact with me. The eyes were dark, sunken pools of black. I jerked my head away and said nothing. This shook Eleanor up pretty badly. It was clear that this figure, whatever it was not human, and she didn't know what to make of it. She didn't think E.T. at the time, but now she wonders if perhaps this was some sort of strange hybrid. And other strange experiences followed. She grew up, she became an adult. She moved to Oak Illinois, and in 2006 had that strange praying mantis encounter. But it was about 5 years later, she was out jogging in 2011 when she had another strange encounter. She was again jogging with her dog.
See, no, the more times that people have these encounters with extraterrestrials and stuff, like just in their day-to-day life, less likely I am to think it's something that's actually physically happening, like in the real world, and something that's probably more likely happening psychologically to them. And yeah, hallucinogens can cause that. But there's a lot of other factors that can lead to that as well. Not to make any assumptions about Eleanor's psychology at all, but generally, the more often people have these experiences, the less likely I am to accept that they were like a real world occurrence. I mean, let me know if you feel different.
A different dog. And went up Eleni Drive, turned left onto Kyle Road, and had just turned left. There's a massive water tower being constructed on her right. And again, it was her dog who noticed something strange first. Her dog suddenly became very excited about something up ahead, and she assumed that it was going to be an animal or another person. And about 25 feet ahead of her, she saw something crawling across the road. And it was this weird, foggy-looking kind of thing. She knows it wasn't normal fog because it was very concentrated. As she says, and I quote, "This was a concentrated ball
Ooh, a fog monster.
of illuminated mist. It was distinctly round and compacted and seemed to be illuminated somehow. It was about 3 feet tall and had tendrils of mist that looked like octopus legs rotating up and over from behind the ball and moving itself forward in a rolling motion. My dog was excitedly pulling me forward, and even though it was
Is it ball lightning?
insanely weird, I did not feel scared about it and hurried to get closer. And as it moved up to the grassy area of the schoolyard, it began to slowly fade and vanished by the time I got close. It was 1 year later, in 2012, that Eleanor had her first UFO sighting. Looking out her backyard, she saw a large golden-colored orb hovering over her neighbor's house. She quickly called out her daughter,
You're losing me, Eleanor.
who also saw it, and it hovered there for quite some time before finally moving away. And she continued to have encounters. It was 2 years later, in 2014, she had a very strange encounter while visiting the Sam's Club department store. She was actually in line, and looking ahead of her in line, she was surprised to see a very strange-looking figure. She appeared to be female. As Eleanor says, her head was oblong, pale, and mottled with veins. She had a few spriggles of hair. I wasn't really thinking, but as she slowly turned around, she made eye contact with me, and she had dark pools of blackness for eyes. I jerked my head away as I felt
This reminds me of the black-eyed kid thing, too. People are like, oh, black eyes.
ashamed for inadvertently staring. The store doors opened, and I looked back just a moment after the eye contact, and she wasn't there. It seemed that she had vanished.
Well, praying mantis aliens need stuff from Sam's Club too. They need bulk. I mean, they're traveling across star systems, so probably need like bulk toilet paper. Assuming that they poop. Maybe bulk snacks for the trip. Maybe they got some of these crickets to eat because they're mantises.
What was really strange is not only the appearance of this being, but how quickly it disappeared. It seemed to disappear much more quickly than just walking away. Eleanor does not know what to make of this sighting, and again, wonders if this could perhaps have been a hybrid ET that was showing itself to her on purpose. She doesn't know. But it was shortly after that she moved out of O'Fallon, Illinois, and that was her last really unexplained experience. But there was one weird thing that did happen. Shortly before moving out of this home in O'Fallon, she and her husband had invited a couple over. And the husband
You think it's ergot poisoning there, Brian Stevens?
of this couple was a retired Air Force officer who had actually worked at the nearby Scott Air Force Base. And normally Eleanor does not talk to anyone about her 2006 sighting of a praying mantis ET. But for some reason she found herself telling this guy, a colonel, the whole story. And after telling the story, the Air Force officer seemed to be very awkward and uncomfortable. As Eleanor says, they sat in quiet silence as I regretted my mistake. When I finished, they were quiet. After a few moments, he told me he didn't believe in that kind of stuff. Seemingly hesitant, he proceeded to tell me that he had worked with a guy at Scott that lived somewhere along Kyle Road who told him that weird things happen over on Kyle Road.
What's up with Kyle Road, y'all?
I know he didn't mean weird stuff like cops and robbers sort of things, by the way he said it. I asked if he could tell me exactly what, and he said no. And that was the last of that. So Eleanor is ultimately happy that she's had these weird experiences. She feels that
The mantis monster of Kyle Road.
they've enriched her life and enlightened her to what is truly out there. But it was her encounter with a 15-foot tall praying mantis that impressed her the most. That was actually why she contacted me, because she had read another encounter involving a praying mantis in one of my books. And in that encounter, the praying mantis was also 15-foot tall. I would call this an outlier. Most of the praying mantis type cases are usually, they're 8, maybe 9 feet tall. But in her case, she's insistent. She's absolutely...
She basically saw a kaiju, like a bug kaiju, right? Like if Godzilla is like a person sized, and the giant praying mantis she saw was like mantis sized to Godzilla. She saw a kaiju mantis.
Sure that this figure was 15 feet tall. As she says, it was a 15-foot tall praying mantis man striding down the street early one morning while I was out for my run. It has definitely changed my life and my perception about what exists here.
Was it a man? Did it have 4 legs in the back, and then the 2 arms? I need better descriptors, I think.
And in other places. So that's it. Those are the 3 praying mantis ET encounters that I wanted to share with you. I covered Jeannie Noble's case in my book, Inside UFOs. The other case involving Tom and the strange grasshopper dream, and Eleanor's case with the 15-foot tall praying mantis are both in my new book, Wondrous, 25 True UFO Encounters. So you can read more about...
How do you decide if they're true or if someone's pulling your leg there, Mr. Dennett?
What happened in that book. But yeah, these cases show that there does appear to be praying mantis ETs visiting our planet. And again, this would be probably among the most common, certainly next to greys and human-looking ETs, of the type of ET that people tell me about. It's not unusual.
Well, I would consider greys at least an insectoid to a point. You know, the big unblinking eyes, and yeah, they have a very like insectoid-like quality to them.
Eleanor's description matches perfectly what I've heard from other people, as well as, for that matter, Tom's description and Jeannie's. So that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I really appreciate you watching. Thank you very much, and until next time, keep having fun.
Alien! He's doing the same stuff I was doing with my praying mantis earlier. Alright, so, again, yeah, we got Preston Dennett, apparently a UFO author, talking about insectoid aliens today. Now, you tell me out there in YouTube land, do you believe in insectoid aliens? What do you think these people were seeing or experiencing? Especially Eleanor walking down the street. That's a special circumstance. Most of the time it's someone laying in bed having like a sleep paralysis episode, something like that. But for her to be out jogging and see something, that's it implies to me that there's that she did either she really saw something and just was wrong about what she saw, or she was hallucinating stuff. And the more that he went into it, And the more experiences she had, the more likely I think that it was that she was having a hallucination of some nature. My earliest memories as a kid was a Donkey Kong kaiju chasing us down the road as we drove. Dreams can be very psychedelic. No, that really happened. That's a repressed memory, Junie. That's a repressed memory. You were actually chased by Donkey Kong kaiju down the road. That really happened, according to this Preston Dennett philosophy. But you tell me, have you had your own alien experiences? Anyway, be kind. Take care. We'll see you next time. All right. Live from the Hive audience. Don't go anywhere. That was just the end of Cryptic Corner. There's still more show to go. And getting weird with it's going to be really weird. And we're going to have to crack open a lot of Tartaria nonsense. So, I will see you over there in just a moment. All right, my beauties and bees, who is ready to get weird with it because things are getting really weird today. As we often do, we have to return to the great lost kingdom of Tartaria today, and what's going to get really weird. And I almost feel like I need to preemptively apologize for the direction that some of the stuff is going to take here for us, but I digress. Let me first start by introducing the channel that we're looking at. And let's see here. Now, we did just recently do a Tartaria video, but it was Hans Wormhat, so it was a special case because Hans Wormhat is a special case. We're getting back to just some standard Tartaria nonsense today. So this is a channel called Jason Jack, and this channel is established to be a light to the Lord Jesus Christ, our Creator and Savior, and the Bible in which His truth is revealed. He talks about his book, about Jesus, and to be fair, early on, his channel was like literally very Jesus focused, very Christian focused. But as he moved along, he became more and more obsessed with what he calls Satan's little season and the fall of Tartaria, the 1,000-year reign of Christ, and a whole lot of weird. As you see, he too got into aliens, which, you know, I like aliens, but languages of angels. Then he started getting into things that are Tartaria adjacent, amazing architects, and then the timeline video. We now in Satan's little season? And that's an hour-long video. We're not going to watch it, but we are going to dig into this orphan train thing because I have so many questions. Has the Millennium Kingdom been hidden within the Byzantine Empire? So yeah, you kind of get an idea where he's going with this stuff. And from there on out, all his content is about Satan's little season and the fact that we're living in like a demonic era of time. Like weird stuff too, like Liberty Bell and Thanksgiving. Continental drift, evolution, casting pearls before swine, all the medical symbols, Statue of Liberty. It gets really weird, but we are going to focus on their weird direction that they take things in with the orphan trains here. There's two videos on orphan trains. The first one's 43 minutes and the second one's 21 minutes. I don't know if we'll get to the second one or not, but I think we need to watch the first one first. And he kind of explains what the Satan's little season and all that stuff is a bit throughout the video. But if I need to elaborate more, I've watched more of his stuff and kind of felt it out. But we'll make it through this. So let's go. It's insane asylums and orphan trains. Is there a connection to the little season? All right. Morning, Maya. because it was called the Enlightenment period, and all of a sudden everything, the doctors wanted to have everything have a diagnosis, you know, things like you could be locked in an insane asylum for just being a woman, basically. It's just called hysteria. For just, it didn't matter, your child could put their own mother in an insane asylum for hysteria. It was a weird time in medicine, but, you know, a necessary time to get to where we are now. But, like, I mean, I'll be the first to say that if I lived back then, I'd probably be in an asylum. Just some of my behaviors might have got me locked up. I'm not ashamed to say that, because they put a lot of people in asylums for a lot of stupid shit for a long, long time. I'm going to speed him up. There's reasons why there's orphanages too popping up. We're going to look into that, but it's all very sad though. Just so you know, it's very sad, but and what orphan trains were in and of themselves is quite sad as well. So wait a minute, they rejected Christ, but they lived during the 1,000-year reign of Christ? Can you explain that to me? Can we crack that open? Oh, the audio's not playing. Ah! Is it playing now?
Hey guys, I want to do a video today, and I want to look at insane asylums, orphan asylums or orphanages, and orphan trains. And we're going to look at a fair amount of slides looking at these old world buildings that were used for orphanages and to house the mentally insane. And
starting over!
I want to answer several questions about these buildings, about orphan trains. Why did we see all of this really pop up and become popularized in the late 1700s, early 1800s throughout the rest of the 19th century? Why was this specific time period so packed full of these insane asylums, these orphanages, these orphan trains? Well, let's start with this example. And as we go through this, I think you're going to see a picture develop, not what our history books tell you, not what...
I used to have a muted alert. I used to have like an alert that would that you could type in exclamation point mute, and it would say, "Bree, you're muted."
History tells us about the orphan trains, about insane asylums, why they were used, why all these orphanages popped up during the 1800s, but show you truly that this was a transitional period between the millennial kingdom of Christ and Satan's little season. Satan's little season, I proposed in my last timeline video, began in 1776 at the time of the founding of the Illuminati. Those who were waiting.
1776 was when Satan's little season started. Just keep that in mind. That's a weird year, but...
for Satan to be released from the abyss, from the bottomless pit. The people during this transitional time leading up to this point knew exactly where they were in the timeline. They knew that they were at the end of the millennial kingdom of Christ. They were part of that era, but they rejected Christ, rejected the gospel, did not like that kingdom, and were waiting on a future kingdom to pay homage and allegiance to. This is who Satan used to carry on Satan's little season beginning in the late 18th century. Those who rejected Christ and rather placed their allegiance to Luciferian doctrine as they were anticipating this season to begin. And
what? So this is the part where I was like, so they're rejecting Christ right? So, but they lived in the 1,000-year reign of Christ. That's where that's not making sense to me.
And I want to show you just one example of this transitional period and a person in history and how this works. But when you look at all these old world buildings, these cathedrals, these government buildings throughout
John Laval, are you Luciferian?
the world, in these examples, orphan asylums, insane asylums, look at who they say the architects were. Look and see who founded them, and then do a name search and begin to learn more about these people. Almost always you will see that the people that are described as founding these buildings.
It's this the funniest thing about this whole video is that it's mostly him saying, look at these buildings. People in the 1800s couldn't build these buildings. People in the 19th century didn't have the technology to make a building this fabulous. That's his whole argument.
Were Freemasons within the Illuminati, that these buildings had Freemason Masonic rituals at their initiations for their repurposing. And let me show you this as an example. The McLean Asylum, named after John McLean. John McLean was a merchant who was born 15 years before 1776. This is at the tail end, in my timeline, of the millennial reign of Christ, as we are entering the last few years before Satan's little season began. It says John McLean was born in 1776.
No, he was born in 1761. You just highlighted it, and then you said 1776.
That date is unknown, and his birthplace was likely Milton, Massachusetts, where his mother's parents had settled. Let me show you a couple of things here. One, McLean was a merchant who partnered with Isaac Davenport. He worked from offices on Long Wharf while ingraining himself in Boston society, becoming a member of the Massachusetts Boston chapter of the Masonic Society. So John McLean here was a Freemason. And he shows you he's a Freemason by how they pose for pictures, the symbols that they use. But they did this so that people would know that they were part of this new transitional period into Satan's little season, and that they did not give allegiance to Jesus Christ, but rather Satan. These are Satanists. They are those who were awaiting the
Freemasons are Satanists. Yeah. That's old news, I guess.
Book enlightened one, the light bearer, because they...
I know, right? Brian Stevens like, what? Masons build buildings? Amazing revelation.
They rejected Christ and the things of his kingdom. And they're showing you who they're giving their allegiance to.
I don't even care that he's a Mason. Let's read a little bit about this guy that he's skipping over, though. Was an American merchant, most famous because of his will. The will was subject of the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court case, Harvard College versus Amory, which led to the prudent man rule, left a bequest to Massachusetts General Hospital, which led to McLean Hospital being named after him. The established the McLean Professor of Ancient and Modern History, a professorship at Harvard University. So it doesn't sound like he did anything nefarious. Sounds like he was. I mean, he was a merchant, so obviously he was working within the confines of capitalism and succeeded. So, congratulations, Merchant McLean, I guess.
So he donated a large sum of money, and that's for these hospitals and these mental health institutions, and that's why his name was. That's why the Insane Asylum was named after him. He gave a large endowment to Mass General Hospital, and it says he left a bequest to Mass General Hospital, which led to McLean Hospital being named after him. But look at this. And he also established the McLean Professor of Ancient and Modern History, a professorship at Harvard University. So not only did
I get it. He's going to link the threads. This guy was rewriting history and re-educating people in these hospitals.
Used for insane asylums in Boston. But he became a professor of Ancient and Modern History at Harvard University. One of the most prominent universities in the world, an Ivy League school. And he was a professor teaching ancient and modern history. Do you think this Freemason who's teaching ancient history is going to tell you about the millennial kingdom that he was on the
If this guy knew it was best for him, he'd put out his own seasoning and call it Satan's Little Season to put on your food.
they'll end up, and whose parents, who probably were also Freemasons within the joining of the Illuminati, do you think that he is going to tell his students?
Well, you saw that I maybe you didn't see it at Fox, but there was another video about that showed all the the medical symbols, like was it the staff of Horus or whatever that they use? It's like, oh, it's all Satan. Hospitals and doctors are the devil.
It's at Harvard University about the millennial kingdom of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Or do you think he is going to say that didn't happen and that it was a 1,000-year period, that very little happened, it was filled with plagues, and let's refer to it as the Dark Ages? That this is who wrote our history books, that university students in the 18th and 19th century, after the establishment of the United States, people like this are who rewrote history and our history books that we have in libraries today.
So they created modern history.
But that just shows you,
after the fall of Tartaria, they invented the Age of Exploration and the Dark Ages and all that, and the Middle Ages, all fabricated to cover up the Golden Era, the Golden Tartaria era under the 1,000-year reign of Christ.
that
Yes.
there's this period of time. John McLean is an example, but you can look at hundreds of others of people who were part of this transition in Satan's little season. And Satan used these people, these families, all the famous families that you hear, the names that you still hear today, that founded, all these world governments and buildings and healthcare systems and educational systems, all of these old world buildings that are named after these people. These all come from this transitional period after the millennial reign of Christ. These people were part of the Illuminati. The Freemasons were a sect of the Illuminati that joined the Illuminati at the time Satan was released from his prison and began the little season. And people like him were put into prominent positions over the first several decades.
So does Satan pick him personally, or how does this work?
Of this little season throughout the world, in the educational system, in the government systems, in the healthcare systems, you name it, in the churches. They crept in unawares within the churches. Satan's tentacles was throughout all worldwide institutions.
I didn't even know Satan had tentacles. They never draw him with tentacles these days. Can you show us what Satan's tentacles look like? These shitheads want to bring back the Dark Ages. Well, they think there was this glorious golden age apparently before 1776.
During the first few decades to get his season kicked off with a bang. And those who knew the millennial reign of Christ and opposed this transitional time that did not go along with the narrative, these were people that they had to deal with. And their children they had to indoctrinate so that John McLean could teach them about the ancient history of the Dark Ages rather than the millennial reign of Christ and the modern history of Satan's little season, which was to come. Let's go to another slide.
So the idea is, again, that there was no Dark Ages, no Age of Exploration. All of that was fabricated by John McLean and forced on the public, and the people who resisted got locked in insane asylums, which is why there were so many to be re-educated, and their children were taken and put on orphan trains. Now, that's where we're going with this, just to be clear.
Is a building that our history books say was built in 1790 in Charleston, South Carolina, to be used as
this is
an
insane.
Orphanage. Just 14 years after the United States declared independence. Do you think within that period of time of the founding of the United States that this structure could be built and used to house orphans? No.
Yes, I do. You don't have any idea about the massive labor force that we had in when slavery was legal to build giant structures like this and make them all fancy and pretty. We've had like there's the church in the background, the steeple. This guy has to know we've had steeples for hundreds and hundreds of years, church steeples that are really tall. It's not like a new concept. Of course, he thinks everything started, our whole world hit the reset button in 1776. So, go figure.
Now, this is an old world building. This was built well before 1790. This was built during the millennial kingdom of Christ. But now, during this early transition of Satan's little season,
I love mushrooms on my pizza too. I tried to talk everybody and get anchovies, but nobody would. Maybe someday.
This building was repurposed to be used as an orphanage. And we'll talk about why there were so many orphans during this time, and talk about why so many people were going crazy, quote, losing their mind, and had to be housed in insane asylums.
People weren't going crazy and losing their minds. Just like I said at the towards the beginning, people were. It was during the Enlightenment or post-Enlightenment, and the doctors wanted to have a diagnosis for everything, and sometimes like normal things, like again being a woman, were just like, oh my god, this person is insane, they're hysterical, or having depression, or having anxiety, all that sort of stuff. It's all lock them away. So yeah, the asylums were full, and the doctors wanted aberrations to study because we were learning medicine. Terrible time for patients, important time for medicine nonetheless.
Here's another orphanage set to be built in the early 1800s in New York. And again, the same type of old world structure, architecture that we see in a lot of buildings, the Romanesque type, the buildings architecture you see right here, but around it you just see dirt roads. You see people, there's no technology, no cars, but obviously no construction equipment. But yet they want us to believe that this was built in the early 1800s.
Okay, and he acknowledges that this is Roman style. How long ago does he think the Roman Empire was? But he thinks that the Roman buildings are part of this the millennial reign of Christ too. So like the Roman buildings and these buildings are the same age and built by the same society, right? Like it wasn't that the founding generation of the U.S. Modeled themselves after the Roman Empire and their architecture. It was that they were literally part of it. It like all happened together. And well, in 1776 forward, we repurposed these old buildings to be our modern orphanages and stuff, and insane asylums. Yeah.
And for the purpose to house orphans. And this is a picture of the orphan asylum in New York in the late 1800s. But it's not just the United States. This was worldwide that we saw this transition. This rebellious time, this transitional period in the early time of Satan's little season was a historical time of rebellion. You see all the wars that were going on in our history books at that time. The French Revolution, for instance, and all the Napoleonic Wars that you see throughout several decades between many, many countries throughout Europe, Africa, Russia, into Asia, had nothing to do with France, but it's labeled the Napoleonic Wars. But this was...
What do you mean they had nothing to do with France? Who do you think those countries were fighting for or against? Right? Who do you think in the Napoleonic Wars? You're like, oh no, France wasn't involved. What?
Basically a period of rebellion. And we see right here, this lunatic asylum was founded in the early 1800s in Glasgow, Scotland. And does this look like a building that was built by these people here with cows?
Yes. No, the cows didn't build it. Cows don't build things. So they may have had some oxen involved in the construction. But have you seen some of the cathedrals and stuff in Scotland? There's some beautiful architecture. That's some amazing architects in Scotland. Scotland was ahead of its time as far as building structures that were able to withstand the elements. But yeah, it's a beautiful building, and again, stuff built in during and post Enlightenment, especially dealing with medical stuff. A lot of money was pumped into early on. A lot of money was pumped into setting up these, not just for mental health stuff, but just doctors in general. It was treating all sorts of medical cases, but the crown even was interested in investing in such technology, because before this, remember, people would just die of plagues, and people would suffer from diseases in the streets and run rampant, and they wanted to understand why. So a lot of money was pumped into healthcare at this time. Oh, you mean the French Emperor Napoleon, right?
The dome cathedrals, the associated buildings, the walls, the gates leading up to this old world structure, they try to tell us that this was built in Glasgow, Scotland, to house the mentally insane. That is insane in and of itself, for them to think that we would believe such a thing. But during this little season of deception, the world has been deceived. And the lie that's been told about all this is so big that people buy it.
Is it Tartarian cow juice, Robin?
Here's another orphan asylum that was built in the 1800s in Grand Rapids, Michigan. They say this was built in the 1800s to house orphans in Grand Rapids, Michigan. This is a postcard of it in 1912. This no longer stands here because after that, guess what? A fire happened.
So I gotta tell you, dude, also, when you're talking about orphanages, it's weird how you're like dodging talking about the church, which usually ran and financed a lot of these. As you can see, there's crosses on the tops of these buildings, right? These were generally, the Catholic Church was heavily involved. So was the Anglican Church in programs to help orphans, because that was one of the expectations that when people donated to the church, that they were donating to orphans. So these buildings were financed, and that's part of the reason why they're so beautiful too. It wasn't just pumping money into medicine. It was hospitals and orphanages were funded by churches, and thus had just exuberant budgets to do whatever they wanted with it, and hire the artisans of the day to construct the finest looking buildings to feed gruel to orphans, and
it burnt to the ground. And you'll see that narrative so many times about these old world buildings. They're either destroyed, they destroyed by fire, destroyed by wars, or simply they were not needed anymore, and so they were demolished so that something modern could be built in its place. You see these narratives time after time after time. We can't build this today. We can't build something like this. The way that this was built, with the materials used, cannot be duplicated.
Right? Like St. John's kind of gives it away. I agree, Brian. It's like, no, they think an ancient Tartarians built this, Dave. Yeah, ancient society that lived during the millennial reign of Christ, a golden era of 1,000 years that ended in 1776, and now we covered up what we call the Dark Ages, and the Age of Exploration and stuff like that. The period also, the 1,000-year reign also coincides with like the Roman Empire and things like that. That's all part of this greater global empire that covered the world, called Tartaria. And they had advanced technology, and it was all interconnected trade and everything. And all of a sudden, the mud floods happened. Everything was buried and destroyed, and humans started over again, crawling out of the mud. But these buildings, these ancient buildings, like he'll call them old world buildings and things like that, we dug them out of the mud. We didn't build them. We dug them out of the mud flood. And like Roman ruins and stuff are also from the same time period, that were destroyed by the same event, but they were not covered with mud. But there are some that were covered with mud. It's very complex. But there was a big mud flood, is the important thing to remember about Tartaria. Was it the flood of Noah?
But they want you to think that in the 1800s, during the horse and buggy time, that this could be built.
Yes.
Here's another insane asylum in Paris this time. And you can see the massive structure here with the fountains, the gardens, the walls, the gates, something that's kind of described in the Bible, when you see,
And you can see it says royal on the name here, so you know this was funded by the crown, because as I was mentioning before, the churches and the crown were very interested in healthcare at this time. It was a new concept, and it was the future, and it was salvation. Healthcare was salvation for people coming out of how many years of plagues and war and just disease ravaging society, and healthcare comes along. Yes, they were very interested in financing it and put a lot of money into it, which is why they can afford big fountains and fancy gardens outside their asylums. And some asylums are still like this day, big fancy buildings. And also, when it comes to mental health care, that's not a bad idea to have gardens and fountains and stuff. I can tell you personally that having those access to those kind of spaces makes it much easier for someone to flourish.
Within a city, and you see the walls and the gates that people enter and leave through. This is that type of structure. This is old world architecture here. This whole complex is old world in its layout. But they will
see, they're old world, and that means that it was from before the mud flood.
Tell you that this was built in the early 1800s for the mentally insane in Paris. Here's an orphan asylum in London Orphan Asylum, said to be built in 1828. And you can see, again, very
Roman pillars, so it must be ancient. Old world buildings.
Few people outside. The amazing architecture, this Romanesque type architecture, the huge marble columns, something that can't be built at the time they said it could. And
why?
For the reason they said it could.
Why?
Here's another.
They just couldn't build it. It's one thing when they're like, they look like a pyramid in Central America, and some racist guys like, oh yeah, brown people couldn't build this. Or they look at even the pyramids in Egypt. Oh, these had to be built by white people. But it's even funnier when they're like, humans in the 1800s couldn't build architecture like ancient Rome. Impossible. It's like ancient Rome. It's a Roman. I mean, that was Roman style with the pillars and stuff, right? This is not Roman style. This is more, what would you call this? Eastern. This almost looks Eastern Orthodox style to me, but with the way that the domes and all the spires and stuff.
London Bedlam Insane Asylum. This was said to be built in the 18th century in London to house the mentally insane. And you can see the beautiful grounds.
Oh, that's Bedlam. Well, that's one iteration of Bedlam. Bedlam was rebuilt a couple of times, in a couple different locations too. But it is the quintessential madhouse, and the fact that it has that at this point, when this version of it was built, because it goes way back. Bedlam goes way back. I watched a video on the whole thing, the whole history of Bedlam, because I'm weird. I'm into that sort of stuff, and how it started off and where it ended up. And I believe this would have been like the new location that was built in the 19th century. And it looks like they did use the architecture of the time to build this. What do you call this? Is this Gothic architecture? Byzantine style? I'm not sure what you'd call it.
The gates leading up to these domes, these spired buildings. You can see this Gothic cathedral in the background. There is no way that this was built at that time by those people for that purpose. This is the old world angelic architecture of the millennial reign of Christ.
Angelic architecture. Was that built? I mean, it was built by angels? I think you just got your question answered about who built it, guys.
That after the season ended of the millennial reign on earth and Satan's little season began, that those that were in allegiance with Satan after he was released from the Bible,
you need to stop trying to make Satan's little season happen, bro.
Pip began to take over, usurp, steal these buildings and everything that was in it for their own purposes. This was used as an insane asylum at the beginning of Satan's little season in London, England. This housed those who transitioned from the millennial kingdom of Christ into Satan's little season that did not go along with the new narrative that was being printed, that was being told, and that the history books were being rewritten. These were for the people who did not go along with it. The incurable from knowing the past and refusing to go.
Where are you getting this from? I mean, I know you're it's like rectally sourced, but like you're coming up with these theories on your own. But based on what? The incurables. Where's the documentation of the incurables? Is that just a term you came up with? Like Satan's little season, like the 1,000-year reign of Christ that you think is in the past now, which most Christians think is in the future, I guess. But and now we're in Satan's season.
To the false narrative of what it was, the Dark Ages, what they say when they knew it was the millennial reign of Christ. And so they were labeled insane. They were labeled religious zealots. There were probably also those that
reminds me of Ken Ham saying, why couldn't they have steel and cranes to build Noah's Ark? People were smarter thousands of years ago with no soap and toilet paper, etc. Imagine actually trying to fact check everything he says and provide a real historical context. It would take years, Brian Stevens. I know, right? Maybe I bit off more than I can chew with this one. This dude should have been in Bedlam. Yeah, well, in Bedlam was kind of a nickname for it too. It's like Bethhaven, Bethel. Let me see. I don't want to get it wrong, so it's been a while. Bedlam Hospital, yeah, Bethlehem Royal Hospital. It started off as an almshouse.
The undesirables, maybe, that had mental handicaps and stuff, and they were all thrown in here together during this early transition of Satan's little season. They were tortured. They were experimented on medically. They were put in torture devices and restraints, almost like you have prisoners of war trying to...
So he sees like old mental health like treatment techniques, which were awful. Again, we talked at the beginning too. It was awful to be a patient at this time, but it was a golden age of understanding medicine and healthcare for a lot of conditions. So, but yeah, as far as the way the patients were treated and experimental services provided, things like electroshock therapy, things like the straitjacket, the rubber room, and all that stuff were innovated during this period of time. So he's looking at those things and being like, oh, these were obviously torture devices to get people to believe the 1492 narrative.
Re-educate them. If they didn't go along with that, they did lobotomies. They did other things to try to change their memories. This is what was going on at that time and the reason why. And their children were taken from them. There were cities, towns throughout the world. Houses were broken up during the early decades of Satan's little season, during all these periods of wars that we see in our history books. These were actually part of the rebellion from Christ and his millennial reign, and those who transitioned into Satan's little season who still held the gospel of Jesus Christ.
I'm going to have a hard time walking away from this one, guys. I'm going to have a very, very hard time walking away from this and not just continuing to go through these videos and explore this narrative, because this is wild to me.
And were believers and trusted in his word and carried on the good news into Satan's little season. This is who were placed in these insane asylums. They were doing this to try to stamp out the past, label this the Dark Ages, so that they can...
Basically, what he's saying is that insane asylums were used to hold Christians who believed in Jesus' reign, and that their children were stolen from them.
Rewrite history and transition into a new era. And their children were taken from them, placed in these orphanages, like this one in Los Angeles that they said was built in 1843. They were placed in these orphanages, and these were basically indoctrination centers.
And this place is called Saint what? Saint... I'm sure it's Saint something, just judging by all the crosses and the fact that it was in California in the 1800s. The construction of this building was funded by the Catholic Church, would be my assumption. And if you don't think the Catholic Church had the funding in 1834 to construct big fancy buildings and hire the best artisans of the time. You're just not familiar with the history of the Catholic Church and how long they've been taking their tithings from the people the people of how would you say, of Roman descent.
These were led by people who were part of Illuminati, the Freemasons that found these buildings, repurposed them for their own goals and intentions in Satan's little season.
Found the buildings again buried in the mud. They had to dig them out. Had to dig them buildings out of the mud floods.
These were indoctrination centers all across the world to re-educate the youth who are coming out of the millennial kingdom of Christ and within the first few generations into Satan's little season that had heard of the millennial reign of Christ, to say, no, that was the Dark Ages, that did not happen, and indoctrinate them in all of Satan's deception that we see in the world today. But this is an orphan asylum in Los Angeles, California. In 1843, it said it was built. But this, when you hear the gold rush of California in 1849, like the San Francisco 49ers, the football team named after the 49ers that went out to...
When you say I should have been a phycologist, like, are you talking about like the study of like algae and stuff? Or did you mean to say...
explore and to find...
I'm not opposed to being a phycologist. I just didn't know what it would have to do with studying orphan asylums, Brian Stevens. Oh, okay. Psychologist, yeah. I'm more likely to be a psychology patient than a psychologist.
Gold in the late 1840s. This is what they were truly looking for. This is what they were after. They were looking for gold within old world buildings like this. They were looking for gold and silver and precious stone.
So, to clarify, the California Gold Rush was not digging for gold. It was digging for old world Tartarian buildings to dig out of the mud, and they would find treasure inside. They would find treasure inside.
That had not been found yet by those that founded the United States and had not gotten that far west. There was a wild rush as more and more of these old world buildings were found all throughout the United States, that California was the last to be hit. And the gold rush that we see in our history books, once again, this false history, this false narrative, this is actually what people were going out to try to find. Structures like this and try to loot and raid the contents within it.
So yes, the California Gold Rush was when we rediscovered the Tartarian buildings. Now, usually they're he hasn't mentioned the mud flood here at all, but usually they're dug out of the mud flood.
Here's another orphan asylum in New York City. And again, over and over, you see the cathedral-like architecture. And they want...
almost like they were financed by the church, because the church did collections under the understanding that they would take care of orphans with the money that they were receiving. So they used the money to build luxurious palace-like orphanages. Because they received a lot of money. And again, the crown did the same thing.
Want us to believe that this was built at that time for orphans. This is a bird's eye view of the Georgia State Insane Asylum, the sanatorium. And you can see, again, the old world buildings. This was built in the Millennial Kingdom and transitioned into something else, repurposed into insane asylums during the early period of Satan's little season. You can see the Romanesque architecture, the domes, the manicured gardens, the fountains, the waterfront views, the tree-lined streets, and the associated complex within this. This was not built for the insane, to rehab the insane and those who have lost their mind.
I think because you're confused about what a sanitarium is. I think. I mean, that's going to be the bottom line here. Sanitariums... I guess I'm thinking of sanatoriums, but... yeah, so let's see. Sanitarium. Yeah. Sanitas means health. So I think these are just like regular healthcare facilities. What's the difference between a sanitarium and a sanatorium? Sanitarium and sanatorium are often confused interchangeably, but there are some differences. Sanatorium. The term sanatorium is more commonly used to refer to a medical facility to treat tuberculosis. Okay. And then the word sanitarium. Sanatoriums were often located in rural areas and were built to maximize exposure to sunlight and fresh air. Yeah, but what's this? I want to know about a sanitarium, because I don't think sanitariums were always meant like mental, like asylums. I think it just mean, yeah. Here it says here that synonyms for Merriam-Webster says synonyms for sanitarium are hospital, hospice, and sanatorium. So I think he is assuming that at this time that this whole facility was dedicated to mental health, but I think this was just like a regular hospital.
For those, this was built for something completely different within the Millennial Kingdom of Christ, but was then repurposed by Freemasons, by the Illuminati, for those who remembered the millennial reign of Christ in their past, and when they couldn't make them, quote, lose their minds and their memories of that past, they put them into these type buildings, quote, insane asylums, and experimented on them, or did that to try to actually, through drugs or surgery, to change their memories, to see if they could change their memories. This is an orphan asylum.
Tell me this is not like the juiciest conspiracy. Come on, guys. Satan's little season. The 1,000-year reign of Christ is being replaced by the Dark Ages. I love this. This is so insane.
In Moscow, that the history books will tell you was built in 1778, 2 years after Satan's little season. There's no way that this was built in the late 18th century. This reminds me of the White City in Chicago from the Chicago World's Fair in the 1870s that they say was built in 2 years and then destroyed after the World's Fair because it was temporary structures. The Chicago World's Fair buildings was old world Millennial Kingdom architecture, just like this is in Moscow. This was not built, obviously, for orphans. This was repurposed by the Illuminati and the Freemasons, who
repurposed by the Illuminati?
Who had locked up or placed the parents of the parentless orphans in insane asylums, and then took those children throughout the world and put them into these old world buildings that transitioned into, quote, orphanages, but rather they were indoctrination centers. And here is an actual picture of the, quote, orphan asylum in Moscow. But this was not built, this riverfront, beautiful, magnificent building was not built as a charitable building to house orphans. Here's another
so you can see
orphan center. No, this is an insane asylum. And you see, they're all the same. They just use some of the old world buildings to house the parents during this transitional period, and then they use some others to house the children. They broke up families throughout this transitional period of the late 18th century into the 1800s.
So, bringing everybody up to speed. So in 1776, when the reign of Christ ended and Satan took over, the people who refused to renounce the reign of Christ were put into insane asylums, which were made from old world buildings, repurposed, or into orphanages, which were made from old world buildings, repurposed.
Hundreds. They broke up families to erase their memories of the past, to give them and indoctrinate them on a different history, and to indoctrinate them into the ways of Satan's little season. This is an insane asylum in Toronto, Canada. And I think it was established, they say, in the early to mid 1800s, just like all of these are said to just about.
Canadians can't build structures like this. They build everything out of logs, held together by the strongest maple syrup. Right? Tell me I'm wrong.
Here's another one in Ontario. And you can see, again, in the forefront, you see horse and buggy. You have some water features here. You have this huge building here. And these picturesque grounds. I mean, just the manicure of the field is impressive. With all the
Canadians can't mow their grass like this. This is just madness. Have you never been to Canada? It's igloos, as far as the eye can see. They live in little ice huts, right? They can't build stuff like this.
The people there, there's no way that these people at that time, horse and buggies, built this in the 1800s for an insane asylum. They did not use...
Homie, they're just bricks. They're just bricks. You can tell they're just bricks. I could go out and lay bricks right now without any previous knowledge. I could go out and lay bricks to build a wall. With previous knowledge of, someone else who had been laying bricks before them, and someone else who laid bricks before them. I could build fancier brick structures with different kinds and shapes of bricks baked, which is just, again, bricks are just squares of clay, baked squares of clay. I'm not even kidding. They're just baked squares of clay, or I don't know if you call it clay, I guess, but anyway, they're baked. They're man-made. So, and we've been making them for a long, long time.
They did not build this for mentally insane people. This was found, repurposed, and those that didn't go along with Satan's little season and the change of history, the change of the narrative, this is where they put them, in places like this. Which gets us to the orphan trains. So during the late 1700s, early 1800s, all these things were going on throughout the world. And we see this in the United States with all these insane asylums, all these orphan asylums popping up where families were being divided, parents placed into the insane asylums, the orphans placed into the indoctrination centers, the orphanages. And so there was child trafficking going on well before orphan trains. They just transported them in different ways because there wasn't.
And he's right here. I'm going to take a quick break to talk about orphan trains for a minute, just so you guys can kind of get a feel for what they are. So, orphan trains were the result of a lot of factors. They were coming. The first orphan trains came from New York City, and they were children that arrived in New York in the 19th century to work. It was a child labor workforce. And jobs became scarce. Some bricks are clay, Brian Stevens. I didn't want to oversimplify it because some bricks are. There's other methods to make bricks too. Am I going past noon? What time is it there? I usually go for about 3 hours, so I got about 45 minutes of the show left. Speed. I saw you had something scheduled this morning too, but I digress. It's up to you if you want to compete against me. I mean, I'm not. I'm bringing some hot, fresh conspiracy right out of the oven for you. The fresh, hot conspiracy, the orphan train. So, but it's the same influx of Irish immigrants that you saw in the 1830s through the 1850s, actually up until the 1860s in New York, in Boston, that produced this orphan class of this orphan workforce. There are a few tragedies more heartbreaking than being an orphan, but in the 1800s in the United States, that tragedy brought with it an unimaginable dimension of loss, abuse, and violence. Orphanages were established to save children from the streets, but they often became places of horror, and homelessness on the street offered no less risk of misery. The first orphanages in the U.S. was established in 1729 in Natchez, Mississippi, for white children orphaned as a result of the conflict between Indians and settlers. Orphanages grew at spectacular rates in the eastern United States between 1830 and 1850 in response to health epidemics, mostly cholera, tuberculosis, and influenza, war, and influx of immigrants, as we talked about just a second ago. The Irish were coming in pretty hot and heavy during this time period, and crushing poverty. Booming industrialization and mechanization also played a significant role in the growth of orphanages. Although child labor had always been common and remained so all during the 1800s and early 1900s, there was such an influx of immigrant children in the 1800s that it created an oversupply of child labor. Many children unable to find work were left destitute and homeless or in orphanages. Many children were placed in orphanages because their parents could not afford to feed them and care for them. In fact, from 1847 to 1869, a review of the Protestant Orphan Asylum in St. Louis, Missouri, revealed that only 27% of the children were full orphans. 69% of the children had one parent, the other parent being deceased or absent. The single parents were equally divided among fathers and mothers. 4% of children had both parents. And then there was a lot of fathers that didn't know how to take care of children, whose spouses died during childbirth, things like that. Also, during the last half of the 1800s, American Indians were facing extermination of their families through war, disease, epidemic, and displacement and destruction of their culture and their land. The government oversaw institutional removal of Native American children from their parents, tribes and communities to boarding schools, orphanages, and mission schools to indoctrinate them into white culture. They were not allowed to speak their native tongues, practice their native ways, and were beaten and abused to break their spirit. The adoption of Native children by white families was promoted, and Native children were adopted by white families at a much higher rate than any other children in the nation. See the posted link, Kill the Indian, Save the Man. Let me pop back over and check in with you guys. Okay, I love it, yeah. LOL, it took me a minute to process. Ember, what did Ember say? I've laid a few bricks. They were usually pretty cuddly after. Yes, at least for the other kinds don't have the crush strength for buildings of that size. Concrete bricks might, but they would be later in that timeline. Yeah. Concrete architecture really started in the 1920s, if I recall correctly. Around 1850, the population of orphans in the East Coast rose to such an extent that 5% of New York City's population was estimated to be abandoned children. A public crisis ensued that resulted in the creation of 3 large charitable social institutions. The Children's Village, founded in 1851 by 24 philanthropists. That's a word I struggle with. A Children's Aid Society, established in 1853 by Charles Loring Brace, and later the New York Founding Hospital. Institutions were supported by wealthy, socially minded donors and were operated by professional staff. Coincidentally, the nation's first animal shelters were also established at this time. So humanities were really pulled into place at this time, is what it sounds like. Together, these institutions fostered a program to place their growing number of abandoned children in homes across the country. Some children were pre-assigned through in-person or mail-in applications, and these applications interested foster families could specify age, gender, personality type, even hair and eye color. But many were put on trains called orphan trains, baby trains, or mercy trains, and transported across the country, where they stopped at various cities where posters had been built announcing the arrival of orphan trains. When the trains stopped, children were essentially paraded into a hall or place designated as the place of distribution, and the children took turns walking across the stage, giving their names, singing songs, reciting poems, or addressing the crowd to make an appeal for their own adoption. Sometimes people even prodded them, felt their muscles, or looked to see if their teeth were good, because they were looking for farm help. Basically, they were looking for people to help on the farms, or I imagine some of them were looking for children to abuse as well, and they were just brought to them in a parade. Babies were the most desirable. The older the child was, the harder it was for he or she to be placed. Children older than 14 were always challenging to place because of concerns that they were too set in their ways or might have bad habits. Children who were physically or mentally disabled or sickly were nearly impossible to place, although many siblings were sent together on orphan trains. Foster parents could choose to take a single child and separate siblings. The first orphan train was believed to have arrived in Dowagiac. Let me know if Michiganders, if I'm saying that wrong. Michigan, with 45 children on October 1st, 1854. The children were accompanied by E.P. Smith of the Children's Aid Society. Smith presented the children to the audience, saying the boys were hard workers and very handy, and the girls could perform all types of housework. In less than a week, all but 8 children had been placed. Smith traveled with the remaining 8 children to Chicago and put them on a train to Iowa City by themselves, where they were sent to an orphanage run by Reverend C.C. Townsend, who planned to place them with farm families who needed laborers. Thusly, the first expedition was considered such a success, more orphan trains were planned, and the exodus of orphans began their trek west. And this continued on in this manner. More than 250,000 orphan children were dispersed throughout the United States between 1854 and 1929. Some of these people were still alive and did interviews and stuff. Some of these orphans that were put on these trains. New York State was the leading state for the fostering children from the train, followed by Illinois, Ohio, Iowa, Missouri. Farms were desperate for labor, and the Midwest states adopted the most orphan children from the orphan trains. Ironically, the trains ceased operating in 1929 when the stock market crashed and the Depression began. By this time, the government had instituted the foster care system based on the concept that children living in family settings were better off than in large institutions. All right, let's go back to
trains. And so these orphan trains basically were the continuation of these kids going to indoctrination centers all across the United States. In this case, with the orphan train movement that occurred from the 1850s into the early 1900s, basically because trains weren't even common until the 1830s and really began to be popularized after that. The railway systems were being developed in the East and then in the West, and the Transcontinental Railroad was a bridge to join the East and the
So it's pronounced Dwagic. Dwagic. Okay, I believe you, D. I trust you. Sometimes I'm terrible at pronouncing stuff.
West railway systems between 1863 and 1869. So that's really when all these orphan trains really began to be prominent. But this is just a continuation of what was going on from the time of the beginning of Satan's Little Season in the late 1700s to the early 1800s. Now they just had a better means of transport for child trafficking after breaking up families and their children and placing these youth into schools, universities, orphanages to re-educate them so that their forefathers and what they told them about the millennial reign of Christ, so that those memories would be erased.
Yeah, they gotta send the kids away so that they don't find out about the millennial reign of Christ on orphan trains.
And that these children, through indoctrination techniques, began to believe a new narrative that we see in our history books, and we are the descendants of these transitional children between the millennial kingdom of Christ and Satan's little season. And we are in the season of deception just like they were. We're being indoctrinated from the time of our birth just like they were. We just go on planes, trains, and automobiles now to universities all over the world. But the Harvard University that we saw with John McLean, the professor of ancient and modern history at the time, who rewrote our history books, we're learning that same history that he developed during Satan's little season.
And where are you learning your history from, dude? Like, where's your history coming from? It seems like you're pulling it right out of the keister, rectally sourced. Where's your this 1,000-year reign and all this. Where is this other history written down at that you're receiving this from? Or are you receiving this through visions from Christ himself?
And here's some more pictures of the orphan trains. And these are probably staged pictures, but what it represents is certainly true in the sense that during these first several decades of this transitional time, there's a lot of turmoil throughout the world with wars, the breaking up of families, and the Illuminati becoming prominent in.
See, taking something as tragic as like the orphan train situation and being like Illuminati, it's just so weird. It's like, oh, the Illuminati had to be involved for things to be awful. Things are awful. They have always been awful somewhere.
Governments throughout the world, from national to state to local government systems, through the healthcare system, through the educational system, through the religious system. It took time for all these people that gave their allegiance, all these big name families that you hear their last names here today. Again, it's all these buildings and cities and all these institutions are being named after. They were the part of this transition time and given prominent roles during Satan's Little Season. Here's an orphanage in.
And it's just established. It's like Satan's Little Season is a thing. It's like we're not arguing about it. It's a thing that happened that we're in right now. And it started in 1776, which basically is, to me, the United States is Satan's Little Season.
Paris, that's no longer here today. That was demolished. But again, just to show over and over, dirt roads, horse and buggy, and then these magnificent buildings. There's no way that these people, that generation, built that. This is old world millennial kingdom.
Why couldn't they build that? Explain it to me. You can't, just because you can't fathom techniques to build stuff without heavy machinery doesn't mean they didn't have them. Scaffolding was invented a long, long time ago, way before they had cranes. They had scaffolding that they could build multi-story buildings with the use of. You didn't need cranes just to do that all the time. But then, like Brian Stevens says, baked clay bricks need even less. This doesn't necessarily look like clay, though. It might be. It's hard to tell from this picture because it could be covered with like a plaster coat, like a stucco.
Built that were used, repurposed for orphans. I think this was before it was destroyed, was later used as a prison. And that's probably what some of these orphan asylums and insane asylums felt like. Here's a picture of the orphans in the Foundling Orphanage in New York City. And you can see these are the children of those who came out of the millennial kingdom of Christ, who were placed into indoctrination centers, who were being taught by those of the Illuminati, those who had allegiance with Satan's Little Season, to transform these young innocent minds into believing a huge, huge lie. And that's what Satan does. He's the father of lies.
What is the lie, though?
And here's another picture of the inside of an orphanage back in the 1800s. And you can see the orphans who were parentless and their guardians are caretakers. And again, I want you to know who is in charge of this world right now, who is throughout the governmental systems of this world.
Is it the nurses? Because those look like nurses.
The educational system of this world, healthcare system of this world, the religious system of this world, you name it. The Illuminati from the late 18th century, from 1776 till current, it's taken 248 years, but through this transitional period that we've been going through in this video, from the late 1700s throughout the 1800s into the 20th century, where technology really began to develop, and now through radio, television, the computer age, and internet, we are now on a daily basis being indoctrinated by those within the Illuminati who began with their forefathers
within the Illuminati just because he said so. No evidence for it. Just he feels like it's true.
Of Satan's Little Season, who are placed in these prominent roles, and we see who these people are. And we see them today in the entertainment industry. We see them every day in the media. But these are who are part of this cult of Satan's Little Season. And take a good look of the caretakers, their faces, their body habitus, and I probably just need to leave it there.
Okay. Now, I know this from watching his other content. He won't say it out loud. But if you pick up what he's putting down, he's implying that these nurses are trans women. Yes. The people in charge are the trans people. Yes, we are.
But take a good look. And do you see it? Another picture of an orphanage. And this is a picture from the late 1800s, maybe even the early 1900s. But again, you see the kids and you see the caretakers of this orphanage. These pious people, right? That only have good intentions, that just want to take care of these poor little kids who don't have parents, right? I mean, look at this. What's going on there? But more importantly, look at the faces of these guardians. Look at this face. Look at this face. That face. That face. That face especially. That face. That face. That. And tell me what you see. Can you see through the illusion of the deception, this season of deception that we're in? Do you see who is behind it? Do you see what is going on? Is it starting to make sense? What you see on TV every day, what you get bombarded with through the entertainment industry and on television and movies, shows, television programming, they're showing you who they are, and I'm showing you when it happened, how it started, the transition of the early days, and now we know why the world is the way it is, because we're.
Are you guys picking up on this? I hope it's coming through to you that this is the trans agenda.
Towards the end of Satan's little season, the season of deception, is all an illusion. It's all an illusion. Bitter is made sweet, and sweet is made bitter in this season that we're living in. But just going on to continuing before this video ends, of just a couple more old world buildings, these orphanage, and this one in Paris, for instance. Again, this is worldwide. This is after Napoleonic Wars, the founding by Freemasons of buildings like this, repurposed to place those children into these indoctrination centers.
And if anybody's got any doubts that maybe thinks that I'm like, oh, you're just inferring that because you think everything's about talking about trans people. This video he goes on, this is part 2 of this. I'm not going to watch the whole thing, but he goes, let me find it, because there's a certain picture that he's talking about, and it makes it, yeah, there we go. It makes it very clear.
Going back to my last video, looking at the guardians and caretakers of these orphan houses, it makes you wonder what is behind the veil right here. Is everything as innocent as it looks here? This looks bizarre to me. This says Charity Bazaar, Love Bazaar, and this is truly bizarre in what I'm seeing here. This does not look right, to say the least. But this is a flyer from the St. Vincent Infant Asylum. And I showed you who was in charge of a lot of these orphan asylums and their dress, and under the veil what they really were. And I think the same goes for here, looking just at the profile, and the hands and the shoulder width and everything else. So you can kind of use your imagination a little bit if you don't know what I'm saying. Oh
again, my gosh. I have struck gold finding this freaking conspiracy channel. The trans agenda, you guys. Oh my gosh.
That's who is in charge this time. This is a big cult in Satan's little season. And they have their own symbols. They have their own rituals. And they show it right in front of you. And we see it today in our media. We see the same people in our media today. We see them in leadership roles of world governments, their spouses, the first ladies.
He's talking about the French First Lady Macron. Which she's not trans, but yeah, there's the conspiracy that she is, and the Michelle Obama.
We see them as heads in healthcare and education. Just look at the leaders of the United States healthcare and educational systems.
So, did you guys know that it was going this way? Did anybody foresee that this was going to take a full frickin' tilt into the trans agenda? Did that? Did you see it coming? I sure didn't. When I started looking into orphan trains, I was like, this orphan train thing seems kind of interesting and kind of like wacky. I'm gonna watch it, and I'm like, how the hell did this become about trans people? And sometimes I think that maybe, you got trans people on your brain because it's all you freaking. And I've had people say that to me before, like, oh, you just see transphobia everywhere you look, Bree. It's like, dude, I was just watching a video about orphan trains, and then shoulder width transvestigation of old art.
See what I mean? But continuing, another orphan asylum. This is on 74th Street and Bloomingdale Road in New York City at the time, and you can see the New York Orphan Asylum. Again, why would they build these glorious buildings with these magnificent spires, these arches, the cathedral look?
Because they had money to burn. The church had money to burn.
Where they only have horse and buggy, no modern construction equipment. But why would they build something so grand and glorious for orphans? Again,
they didn't build it for orphans. They make it pretty for the people who paid for it, for their people who donated. So when they donate the money, they can say, look at the beautiful buildings that we're putting together to care for the poor and needy, and people will be like, ooh.
The Freemasons, the Illuminati, found these buildings. They repurposed them. They renovated them to transform them into orphan asylums. Asylum is a word that used to mean a safe refuge or shelter. But these asylums for the insane and orphans were far from that. These were re-educational centers.
Why would re-educational centers be in the fancy buildings? If these fancy buildings were so desirable, why wouldn't they put government stuff in them?
And there's no telling what all occurred during these time periods in all these different orphanages during the early part of Satan's little season. Here's another orphan asylum. Says this site is to be demolished at the bottom here, the PE Orphan Asylum. But this, like many others, were demolished. You can see beautiful grand structures, but then modernized, transformed to conform it to.
The modernized was the fire escape on the outside. I don't know about that.
An orphanage during the time of Satan's little season and during this transitional time where families were broken up in order for the new narrative to be proclaimed throughout.
You gotta make sure you tell us that. Don't say it with your whole chest. By the transes, we broke up the families. The transes did.
Out the world, and those who didn't go along with it ended up in places like this. Here's another one in New York City. And again, this is a same picture twice, but you can see just the beautiful architecture, the spires.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this is the Hebrew Orphan Asylum that I was referring to earlier on Amsterdam Avenue. I don't think this, I think this has been demolished too. since this photograph. But again,
Yeah.
this huge building.
Does he not know, like, urban renewal was a big thing in the early 20th century? Like, they tore down all these, the old architecture and replaced it with new modern steel-framed architecture with concrete.
This is an old world building. This is built not in the early 1800s for the housing of orphans. This was built during the Millennial Kingdom for the purposes of housing believers, those within the kingdom, for the to glorify God, to proclaim
The transes put the Christians in asylums, and if you let us, we're going to do it again. Is the message that we're supposed to pick up here?
Word of God, and to continue the spread of the good news of Jesus Christ to the world. But after the end of that kingdom,
right? He's like talking about this is I didn't even pick up on that, but yeah, Hebrew Orphan Asylum. There's a flavor of anti-Semitism here with the transphobia
on earth in the beginning of Satan's little season. This was used for other purposes by the Illuminati. Again, another picture. This was a Protestant orphan asylum. So now we're starting to further divide not only skin color, ethnicity, boys, girls, but also religious beliefs. You know, like I said, there's so many.
Those are churches are the main organizations that fund orphanages. Like me telling you this shouldn't be at your age shouldn't be the first time that you come to be aware of that knowledge. Yeah, historically, churches have funded and run orphanages. Yeah, there's state orphanages too, and like I mentioned earlier in the last video we're watching, that there were orphanages run by the crown, but yeah, they not a lot of them run by the Illuminati or the Masons. Unfortunately, it's just that it just doesn't pan out. It's been you guys the whole time in charge of these places, breaking apart families, as you claim.
False churches, gospels that came into the world in the early 1800s. Just in the United States, you see the beginning of Mormonism, Jehovah's Witness, Seventh-day Adventism. You know, you see all these false religions come in during this time.
Wait, there's more than one religion? Does Dad know? Yeah, he's about to go about calling
period. You know, and just further and further segregate the churches. You know, Satan's minions coming into the churches, into the seminaries, unawares, to divide and conquer. That's why we have so many different types of churches today. In Satan's little season, the church has been segregated and divided so much. It is so weak that, you know, everybody within it practically is spiritually blind to what's going on. And then finally, this is the Brooklyn Orphan Asylum, I think, that we saw at the beginning, and this is the kitchen of it. So this is repurposed old world building that has been repurposed into a kitchen. I don't know if it has new flooring or this is original flooring. And we talked
I know that the checker pattern was part of the clowns or Nephilim thing.
About the checkerboard flooring, and was this an actual design within old world buildings of the Millennial Kingdom that the Freemasons simply adopted and then used as their symbology, or was this something new to this New World Order and was part of the renovations of these old world buildings into something of use in Satan's little season? So finally, why were all these orphanages needed in the 1800s in New York City, orphanage after orphanage you can see throughout this slide. And this is just a few of these old world buildings.
And I mean, we just went over why there were so many orphans in the eastern United States in the mid 1800s, but obviously there was the transits that separated the families.
Converted into orphanages during this time. Why were so many needed in New York specifically? Well, I think we see this in New York because New York was a hub of child trafficking in the early 1800s during the early part of Satan's Little Season, when all
Yeah, but it really wasn't child trafficking then. It was, but it was the kids were literally coming for work. They were looking for work. Children worked back then. Like as soon as you were able to walk and had motor skills to do things with your hands, you were put to work.
all these rebellions were going on throughout the world. Again, as I mentioned previously, after the release of Satan from the abyss and the establishment of the New World Order through the help of his followers within the Illuminati and Freemasonry that were placed in positions of power, that these wars that were going on simultaneously were a result of this rebellion from the millennial reign of Christ. And that, for instance...
Hey, Speed, you need to make your stream... I can send my audience to you, but you need to make it... you need to allow it to be done, because when I go to add your stream on for the redirect... It gives me a message that says that redirect privilege is needed. Ask Answers in Atheism to add to their live redirect list in their community settings. So yeah, I can redirect my audience to you. I've had about enough of the orphan trains for the moment, though. We're gonna wrap this up here. So, did I shock you guys? Did that come out of left field? This last 10 minutes of this video, where all of a sudden it was like, "Hey, look at these people. They're very clearly trans." Did that catch you off guard? Let me know in the comments. So. Yeah, we got one more segment of the show to go. It's really short, though. It's Bestiary, which I've been trying to pare down to be under 10 minutes to wrap up the show with something fun and light. So we are going to be moving over there. So to my folks who are here just to get weird with it on Wednesday with me, that's our orphan trains and orphan asylums and the great nation of Tartaria. Hope you enjoyed it. Please remember to be kind. Take care, and we'll see you next time. All right, there's gonna be a little short intermission. Then we're gonna do Breeze Bestiary, and then I guess I'll send y'all over to. I will send y'all on over to Answers in Atheism for Speed's thing, I guess. After this. But give me just a moment, and we'll do Breeze Bestiary. I'm gonna try to cheer things up a little bit with some good news.
Johnny boy, Johnny boy. I get knocked down, but I get up again. You're never gonna keep me down. I get knocked down, but I get up again. You're never gonna keep me down. I get knocked down, but I get up again. You're never gonna keep me down. I get knocked down, but I get up again. You're never gonna keep me down.
Hello, my beauties and bees, and welcome to another installment of Bree's Bestiary, where I bring you facts and folklore about some of my favorite animals, about just animals all over the animal kingdom. And today, kind of a topical news story for us. So I hope that you're here for it, because we have Wisdom the Albatross. If you don't know who Wisdom the Albatross is, she was first tagged in, I think it was 19. It might say here. Let's just pop right over and see what it says here. It's just a short 1.5-minute video. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service reported December 3rd that Wisdom, the world's oldest known wild bird, is back at her winter nesting ground. Wisdom is a Lassan albatross. She returns every year to the Midway Atoll. Not only that, but in 2024, this golden bachelorette has returned with a new mate, and she laid an egg. Yeah, she laid an egg at 74. At least 74 is the minimum age that she could be. Actually, let me mute this. So Wisdom has been around a long time. Biologist, 1956. Let me back that back up. First identified and banded her in 1956. She still has the same tag. Her winter home at the Midway Atoll is 12,000 miles northwest of Honolulu. 1,200 miles, sorry. But it's critical nesting ground for 3 million birds, including 70% of the world's Lassan albatross. And that includes Wisdom. She was previous to 2015. She's changed mates since then, though. Guess they don't mate for life. But she's still raising chicks at that age. Yeah, isn't that wild? Yeah, go Wisdom. Yeah, and I just pulled up CNN's reporting on it too, so I can read it to you guys. Wisdom, the albatross, is 74 at least. 74 years old. She found a new partner and just laid another egg. The world's oldest known wild bird has sparked special joy among scientists after she laid an egg, her first in 4 years, at the age of 74. Wisdom, a Lassan albatross, was spotted with the egg and a new partner last week at Midway Atoll National Wildlife Refuge, an island sanctuary located on the far northern end of the Hawaiian archipelago. She did it again, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services for the Pacific region exclaimed on social media's platform X. Ew, I mean Twitter. Why don't you move over? Hey, USFWS, let's move over to Blue Sky. Come on, get with it. John Plissner, supervisory wildlife biologist at the Wildlife Refuge, said he and his team were optimistic that the egg will hatch and that Wisdom would be fit enough to raise another chick. A special joy, he called Wisdom's achievement. A video posted on the USFWS Facebook page showed Wisdom rubbing her head against her new partner before he sat down to incubate the egg. Biologists spotted Wisdom at Midway Atoll in 2001 with a red band around her leg that they later discovered was placed there by the late renowned ornithologist Chandler Robbins in 1956. The USFWS estimates that the bird has produced up to 60 eggs and mothered as many as 30 chicks in her lifetime. For decades, she returned to the island with the same partner, Akikamiya, but he has not been seen since at least 2021. Experts tagged her new mate last week after spotting them together. Laysan Albatross may live 12 to 40 years. Many die after mistakenly swallowing colorful plastics, which they think is food in the sea. Wisdom has intrigued biologists who are desperate to find out how she manages to live such a long life and still have babies. Each year, millions of albatross return to the Midway Atoll to nest and raise their young, according to the U.S. FWS. The mating season is between October and November, and the species often spends a little more than half the year at the refuge, incubating and raising their chick. During that time, they fly thousands of miles across the ocean for food to bring back to their babies. With Laysan albatrosses flying up to 50,000 miles per year as an adult, Wisdom would have flown multiple round trips to the moon by her age, according to the U.S. FWS. So, congratulations, Wisdom. Beautiful story. Like to wrap up with something positive there. So, what do you guys think? Albatrosses are some of the coolest birds and some of the biggest birds in the world. Now, Laysan albatrosses are not exceptionally big compared to some of the other ones. They're still huge birds. All albatrosses are huge, but the fact that they live so long is more evidence that we need to take better care of the oceans, because long-lived animals like that can learn and grow and develop culture. All right, we've been going 3 hours now. I'm going to wrap up Breeze Bestiary and send y'all on your way. So thank you for joining us today on Breeze Bestiary. Please remember to be kind, take care, and we will see you next time. All right, now for my Live from the Hive people, I'm checking to see if Speed updated their redirect or not. Come on. No, it still says I can't redirect to you, Speed. Sorry. Sorry. But I can say, hey, go on over there and check it out, if that'll help. All right. Well, I'm going to close things out here. Please remember to be kind and take care and do all the things. We'll see you next time.
There's an office and a building and a person and a chair, and you paid for it all, though you may be unaware. You paid for the paper, you paid for the phone, you paid for everything they need to deny you what you're owed. There ain't no you in United Health, there ain't no me in the company, there ain't no us in the private trust. There's hardly humans in humanity. Now the procedure that you're needing ain't the cost-effective route, and only 2% of people end up winning a dispute. So if you get sick, pray to God for help, 'cause your doctor's gotta pray to United Health. Way back in 77, Mr. Richard T. Burke started buying HMOs, putting federal grants to work, made 50 billion buckaroos. Last year, the Warren Buffett of health, and Jeff Bezos of fear. Now CEOs come and go, and one just went. The ingredient you got, bake the cake you get. But if you get sick, cross your fingers for luck, 'cause old Richard T. Burke ain't giving a fuck. Commoditized health, monopolized fraud. Here's the doctors we own and the research we bought. They own the pharmacies and a lot of the meds. They should start buying graves to sell us when we're all dead. There ain't no you in United Health, there ain't no me in the company, there ain't no us in the private trust. There's hardly humans in humanity. There's hardly humans in humanity.
With all the noise, pseudoscience, and political rhetoric clogging the airwaves about transgender people, it can be difficult to understand what's really happening and what's really true. Good news, everyone! Welcome to The Transpositions, your compass in the rugged landscape of transgender issues. Here, we strive to be the beacon of authenticity, providing a platform that amplifies the voices and experiences of the transgender community. From breaking news to in-depth features to breaking down the real science, we are committed to fostering understanding, empathy, and empowerment for all individuals across the gender spectrum. Join us as we navigate the complexities, celebrate the triumphs, and advocate for the rights of transgender people worldwide. Together, we can redefine boundaries, challenge stereotypes, and champion inclusivity. Subscribe today. The link is in